I'll call the June 16th special meeting of the City Council to order. Can we have the roll call, please?
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Okay, it's not on the agenda, but we are going to do a flag salute, which will be led by Councilmember Muldoon. So will you please rise and join us?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We celebrated Flag Day on Sunday, so please join me in saluting our flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So the first item on our agenda this evening is mooring permits, rents, and other provisions, Harbor Commission recommendations. Staff?
Good evening. Thank you for having us. We're going to present tonight some recommendations that the Harbor Commission has studied over the last few months. But first, we're going to do a little history on the moorings. Oops, hold us one second. We have a presentation, so. If you're comfortable, we'll go ahead with it and catch up on the presentation. Okay. Dating back to the early 1970s, mooring rates were set at $2 a foot a year, and later in the 70s set at around $6 a foot a year, later adjusted by CPI. And in the 1990s, by resolution, annual permits were set at $20 a foot per year for offshore and $10 a foot for onshore. And moving forward, onshore were always set at 50% of the offshore rates. In 2010, City Council reviewed mooring charges again, based off of that $20 a foot a year. In 2006, there was an appraisal, and those numbers came in quite high, and City Council decided to reject those numbers. Those were at $7.25 a foot per year. So 40-foot mooring in that case would have equaled about a $3,500 annual permit. Tonight you'll see one proposal from, it's based on CPI. The NMA is bringing that to you. It's based on the 2006 appraisal, rejecting that recommendation and suggesting a reduced rate. There we go. Thank you. So today we go off that 2010 resolution, 2010-132, where we charge 14% of 7 mid-range marinas. So we took 7 moderately priced marinas in the harbor, rejecting the low ones and the high ones. We averaged those, and over 5 years we phased in that increase. It was about a 5% rate off of the mid-market rate, and now we're at 14% fully phased in. So for example, at $55.43, now we have a 40-foot mooring that is roughly $2,200 a year. A 40-foot slip in the harbor in one of these moderately priced marinas, the average, it's about $15,000 a year. Newport Beach Municipal Code requires us to charge rent based on fair market value and in part on the findings of an appraisal. So our rent requirements, as you'll see after the recommendations tonight, you can decide to rely on the 2006 appraisal, incorporating suggestions or changes, update the 2006 appraisal, which will require about a 3-week lead time, or you could have a new appraisal conducted. In 2010, the other major issue was transferability. 2010-132, that resolution also says that after 2020, there are no private transactions of moorings, and moorings transferred in an open market are capped after 2 transfers. The transfer charge is 50% of the annual permit rent. So we saw that a 40-foot mooring is about $2,200, so a transfer fee for that would be about $1,100. And there are unlimited and free transfers within trust, immediate family, or other similar estate planning. And I'll turn this over to Commissioner Brad Avery at this point.
Good evening, Mayor Selich, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Harbor Commission's recommendations tonight. I'd also like to thank my fellow Harbor Commissioners who worked on this subcommittee, David Gerling, Duncan McIntosh, and Joe Stapleton. We had excellent participation by many residents of the city and mooring permittees. The Newport Mooring Association was well represented by its membership, who provided important background information for our hearing. We had 4 meetings, as you can see, spaced out pretty well. We had excellent attendance, somewhat similar to what we have here tonight. And we worked hard to allow a full representation of everybody that was in the room. We waited until we had a chance to hear from everybody, and then we moved forward with deliberation. And it was, each meeting lasted about 2 hours, and we had a lot of good input, which helped us tremendously. Our positions are very similar on the major aspects of this to the Newport Mooring Association, and you'll see that. And the reason for that, and I've got a little list here that I sort of wrote down, were the historical practices that this city has done for the last 40 or 50 years in terms of transferability and allowing people to build equity in the moorings. That was significant in this. The loss of equity for people, not being able to transfer, losing in some cases $40,000 or $50,000 possibly at the end of the period for being able to sell your mooring or transfer it. Another influencer was parity with the decisions on private docks that occurred by the city recently. That was also in our minds. Compelling public testimony regarding the impacts of the 2010 Council's decision regarding rent and transferability. We heard from an awful lot of people that were financially hurt in this, and also for some that had to sell, they took losses. Others who held on were worried about the future, and then the rather rapidly escalating rents having impacts on them as well. A lack of alternative methods of fairly settling the issues of rent and transferability. Quite frankly, the NMA with their CPI index, they did a very good job, we felt, in showing us a continuing line of rising rents to arrive to a $25 per foot charge based on starting in 1976. We looked at similar harbors up and down the coast. It's really hard to compare. Newport's a different market. Every harbor's a different market, but it's in line with most of those harbors in terms of the $25 a foot. There's the original concept of the moorings to provide low-cost access to boating for the public, and that was important for us in our deliberations. Our efforts focused on reviewing mooring policy only without regard to fiscal impacts to the city. We just weren't charged with that, and we understand there's significant fiscal impacts if these were implemented, and that's wasn't in our purview to get into. So the Harbor Commission's recommendations, and again, right in line with the Newport Mooring Association, would be returning to the $25 a foot rent for the offshore moorings. And then you've got the examples before you of what the differences would be. And it's basically having the rents and also returning the ability to transfer their moorings. So this is just a continuation of the CPI line, basically, and I think this will come to you from the NMA shortly, of where we left off. And then on to fiscal impacts and revenue adjustments. I think it's important for all of us, the mooring holders, the residents, to understand what the fiscal impacts are and to see them. And of course, these are tidelands. These would be monies that are very important to the tidelands. So ultimately, if this goes forward, there will be impacts. But again, we didn't consider those impacts in our analysis and in working with all the stakeholders, not just the mooring permittees, but other people in the room who had other interests in the harbor. Mooring transfers. So the two big items were fees and the mooring transfers. The ability for someone to be able to transfer their mooring to someone else and basically sell that permit on an open market. So we feel that should be continued. Whether or not it's good public policy, that could be, it's an argument, but the city has continued to allow this to occur for decades, and people have built up equity, and it's pretty difficult to unwind the equity without hurting people. And again, a lot of people who have moorings are on fixed incomes or on low incomes. Boating is very important to them, and this is the only way they're able to achieve it in this area. The mooring transfers also allows for a market to exist, and that's helpful in terms of just seeing values. And it allows for choice. If we were to go off the wait list, a mooring would come up and the next person in line wouldn't be able to choose where their mooring would be. And that's important because people have all kinds of workarounds, all kinds of reasons they want to be in different locations in Newport Harbor. So when in the market, when there's 12 moorings for sale or 15 moorings for sale, the permits rather, people can choose and say, oh, here's in row A, and this is where I live. I might have a house a few blocks away, or this is where I'm renting. This is where my business is. All these decisions return then if we're able to have an open market. Number 3, the transfer fee. We just went with $1,000, which is about where it would be if we stood on where we are now, and that's, as Chris mentioned, it would be right around $1,000 for a 40-foot boat if there was no change. And so we thought, on balance, a little more return to the Tidelands Fund through transfers was appropriate. The NMA, I think, we're lobbying for a $500 transfer fee. I don't quite remember, but I think it was right around there. And as we get into these things, some of these things are less important, but still have some impacts. And at this point, I'd like to say that there will be some things that we left on the table that were not minor necessarily, but we felt that we could deal with in the ongoing year or two with the Harbor Commission putting recommendations to council for single items. We felt these were perhaps the most pressing, and we'll work forward on the others. And so having some mooring permittees, people have partnerships in boats, or they want to put a family member also on their mooring permit, but in consultation with staff, but also past practices, and we just know when somebody calls and has a problem and they're not maintaining their mooring, or there's a problem with their boat, having one person to go to, one person responsible for that particular mooring, I think is helpful for the city and for mooring management, and perhaps for a few is not ideal, but we think most mooring permittees obviously they own the boat themselves and they're happy with that arrangement. And again, you might hear some people speak to that tonight. Item 5 is different, that it hasn't existed before, but one of the issues with the moorings is that the city has not done a great job of administering the moorings. And again, that's no more than sort of history, if you will. It's just continued that way. And so we recommend the ability for the city to have mooring permittees, if they're going to sell their mooring, to put it on a city website. So every mooring that's for sale at any given time can be seen by the public. And they're free to advertise it wherever they want to, in any magazine, online, whatever. But have one site and have the price listed. And when the mooring permit sells, that buyer and seller would sign an affidavit that it sold for this amount, and that would be posted. And so over time, you would see this market. You'd be able to see where the moorings were, how much they cost. And so someone coming into the market would have sort of an idea of how much they should pay for a mooring. And would also give the general public an idea of what's going on. Previously, these things have happened just off-site. And again, these moorings, this public tidelands is a public trust. And so we felt that the city should be a little more involved, not make the market go away, not hinder people from coming together as buyers and sellers for these permits necessarily, but to at least shed light as to pricing, location, which moorings are selling. I think everybody would have an interest in that. And I think obviously we'd want to do it in such a way that doesn't impact the city in terms of staff time. So that was a recommendation coming out of our deliberations. Transfers between families and trusts, there's a long history of that as well. And we stuck with the policy of just going with unlimited and free transfers within a family or trust. The reality is transfers don't occur that often, and moorings will remain in a family for years. Family members will pass on, or something will happen, and the ability to keep the boat in the family and transfer it to the next person, or the child of the family can continue to enjoy it, was a consideration. Maximum number of moorings permitted, 2 moorings maximum unless currently holding more. So the old tradition was you'd have a shore mooring that you kept your dinghy at, and then you would use that to row out to get to your boat out on the mooring and row back in. That's less true today, but many people have 2 moorings, and some are holdovers from that time. There are some families in town that might have 3. I think 3 is the maximum I've heard of, and those would be able to retain those moorings. But then if they sold a mooring, they would be limited, obviously, to 2, wouldn't be able to go back to 3. The city, through the Harbor Department, runs a mooring rental business to visitors, and that's an important component to being a welcoming destination for boaters. It's also a revenue generator, and the city collects the revenue, and the revenue is used for harbor amenities and projects, so it's important. For the mooring permittees, it's a little bit of a, obviously they don't have a sole exclusive right to their moorings, so even though they're not there, someone comes in, it's not unusual for mooring lines to get ground up into props of visiting boats, people not damaging moorings, so it happens from time to time, and quite often isn't caught, and then the mooring permittee is left with that damage to take care of, unless the Harbor Department happens to notice somebody damaging a mooring. So there are some considerations to make here in terms of rent, in terms of the mooring permittees, the proceeds going to the city, and the mooring permittees not having much to say about when their mooring is rented, when they're gone. So that, I think, is a good policy, however, because it does provide us plenty of space in this harbor to welcome visiting boaters, and does provide some income, which again returns to the Tidelands Fund. Rental fee for short and long-term sub-rentals. Some people feel that the rental fee is too high and discourages people to come in for a longer period of time. So that's something that the Harbor Commission might look at over the next year or so and get a sense of where we are on that and take a look at, but it's not significant, we feel, at this time. Number 10, billing frequency. Staff is going to look at developing more frequent billing options. Some mooring permittees, especially when their mooring rates went up in the last 5 years, they would get one bill, and it was difficult for them to budget toward it. So there was a request to bill more frequently, and we do that with residents in town here through the water bill, right? And so the residents in town get regular mooring bills. And there's number 11, there was unanimity on this to abolish the wait list. There were a couple people, I think, that were close to the end of the wait list after waiting for many, many years that were against this. but the wait list just simply does not work if we're going to have a market where people are coming together and buying and selling the permits. The wait list does not move. And so it gives people hope, it provides sort of a false hope, if you will, and doesn't really service. And mooring revocation, and that happens now and then where somebody just disappears, doesn't respond to the city, doesn't pay their bill, and occasionally a mooring will be given back. And the thought there would be to just codify it that the mooring would be sold at public auction, the funds would go to the Tidelands Fund. And the last item on the list, proof of insurance. This is something that's already on the books, it's already a requirement, but over the last few years, the city has not followed up. And so we have no record of mooring permittees having insurance on their boats out there. And that's a liability to the city in terms of if a boat sinks, and the owner disappears, we've got to raise that boat, and that's a high cost. And then if there's pollution damage, some boats can hold a couple hundred gallons out there, 500 gallons of diesel fuel on the largest boats. So those are considerations the city should really look to enforcing the insurance, proof of insurance that's already on the books. But again, that would be an additional cost because that would take some time. So it's in the Harbor Department contract now to do that. And I don't have an answer for why that hasn't been done recently. I know Dave New at Basin Marine, he has someone that works on that, and I've spoken with them, and they say it's a pain, but they get through it. Because there's always that 10% who you have to kind of chase for that. So it adds some paperwork, but we strongly recommend that be enforced. And we put it out to the mooring group, 150 people in the room, mooring owners, and there wasn't one person against that. Everybody was in favor of that. There was just nobody coming after. So I realize this has been fairly short. I think most of you have probably read the staff report. Finally, my thanks to Chris Miller and Shannon Levin, Harbor Resources. They were invaluable in helping us get these meetings together and giving us everything we needed to come to some recommendations for council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay. Councilman Curry has a question. Brad.
Brad, thank you for your work on this. And I guess the commission had to work shorthanded because we had several commissioners who, in fact, are mooring holders. Is that accurate?
Yes, we had an interesting process to get to a majority.
Right. Are you a mooring holder yourself?
No, I was up until 2 years ago.
Okay. The fiscal issue, you alluded to it, that the proposal will actually reduce Tidelands revenues by approximately $1 million, which is almost half of our total Tidelands capital budget. What do you think we ought to cut if we implement this plan?
Well, I think there are some savings to be had in various projects that the city has teed up.
Well, we've got seawalls, the public pier, dredging, castaways, lower castaways.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Avery, I wouldn't answer that. I think that's a staff question. You would not be expected to know that. That's a ridiculously
I would like the Harbor Commission
actually
to tell
demeaning
us.
question. I really appreciate all the time and effort you put
I
into
would like
this.
Mr. Muldoon, I'd like the Harbor Commission to tell us, because they oversee the harbor, what projects they believe would be the ones that should be cut if we implement this revenue and reduce our Tidelands revenues, because they go together.
Right. No, I agree. It's daunting, and I think there's our needs for infrastructure improvements are not, to me, related to what should be a fair price and delivering fairness to the mooring permittees. At the same time, I think savings can be had. I think we could stage these improvements over a period of years. Take another look at it. It's something that the commission would be happy to do and come up with some recommendations. But we fully understand this is a serious business, and it's a serious loss if it were to go through for the Tidelands, and we don't take that lightly. We just felt compelled due to the testimony and due to the views of many people and the lack of any other city that operates a marina that doesn't do transfers, that has rates that are significantly higher than our rates. So we talked to Monterey, we looked at San Diego. The NMA came to us with this information, but we also took time out and made calls to harbor masters and talked to them about their processes. Santa Barbara, slip transfers. Monterey, slip transfers, mooring transfers. So, and the rents are lower just about everywhere else. So it's difficult. Now, you could argue Newport Beach is Newport Beach, and it's unlike anywhere else, but I think then you're led back to the spirit of the public tidelands and the moorings being a low-cost way for people to get on the water, and it's difficult to weigh the two. But, yeah, thank you.
Okay. First of all, I'd ask the audience to contain your comments to when you get up to speak. I'd also ask my fellow council members to just respect some decorum. This is obviously an emotional subject for a lot of folks. We have a queuing system, so queue in. Everyone will get their chance to speak. It doesn't do any good to talk over other council members that are speaking, so please respect that as we move through the evening. Councilmember Muldoon.
Thank you. I think it's terribly unfair to ask you and answer a question that really is not within your duties. I'm sorry. I really appreciate all the time and effort you put into this. I know we've disagreed in the past, but I don't think you should be asked any questions that will put you in a position that you couldn't possibly be able to answer. I will ask you one question that I think you will be able to answer. Were any of the members of this commission who adjudicated this issue mooring holders at the time?
No. No.
Thank you.
Councilmember Piotr.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Brad, you did not include any revenue for transfers, right? So any transfers that happen and the fee that the city gets as a result of that is not included in the revenues.
I'm not sure on that. The transfers, I imagine, I haven't looked at it, but over time, some years there's going to be more than others, just randomness. So I'm not sure what was added on to that number. But transfers in of themselves, I don't think will move the needle much over time. Maybe, I don't know if staff could answer the number of transfers in any given year.
Well, we also haven't had an efficient transfer system, but
Right.
Without having any numbers in front of me, but a good guesstimate might be that there would be anywhere from 4 to 6 transfers a month. Maybe with an average rate, let's just say at the current rate, perhaps of $500. It's 50% of the annual mooring fee. So if an average 40-foot boat, that's around $500. So Commissioner Avery is correct in that it wouldn't move the needle significantly.
but if it went for a year, like the Harbor Commission is recommending, it's $1,000 times 70 boats or so, $50 to $70,000 a year.
50 might be on the high side, but
You said 4 to 6 a year. Okay.
yeah, I mean
4 times 12 is 48. Okay, so low side is 48 and the high side is 72.
perhaps.
Okay. Brad, the mooring transfers, you had recommended 1 per year. Why? I mean, if the city's getting a cut of the transfer fee, wouldn't it make sense to allow as many transfers as they want?
Right. I think this is sort of a give, if you will, to there was a feeling on the part of some people that people have profited through the buying and selling of moorings. And when we were going through our bubble, if you will, before the real estate crash, that was happening. There were a couple people, one person was advertising, moorings, buying and selling moorings. There were some other people acting privately that were buying and selling moorings. And for about 4 or 5 years there, when everything was really running up, that was legitimate concern. And so this, I think, is in there to dampen that, should it happen again. But the reality is, very few people have made money on their, buying and selling moorings, because the cost of, you not only got your rental cost or your lease fee, if you will, but you've got the cost of the maintenance, which is another $600 or $700 every couple of years, maybe more depending on the size of the mooring. So, and then just the cost of owning the boat, if you've got a boat on it. But the reality is, very few people make money transferring moorings, and that was there to sort of assuage that fear, I think.
Okay, so you're trying to get in the way of profit making
Right.
between two willing sellers and buyers.
Somebody that's maybe bought, 3 or 4 on the market and then turns them right over if the market got hot. And here, this way, they've got a
So you've got willing sellers and willing buyers, but you don't want to allow them to proceed in transactions.
No, and that's not it at all. We want them to proceed in transactions. This is more a response to just, we don't want to see the market sort of bid up, if you will, in the market. People going into the business of buying permits and then turning around and selling them again. And maybe that's a little idealistic, but that's something that was on there before, by the
I
way.
know you want to get rid of the speculation, but speculation works both ways.
Yes,
you
it
lose
does.
money and make money.
That's right.
Okay, and the mooring transfer fee, you like the 100% number rather than the 5% of the cost? I know you presented it both ways.
Easier to just figure out. I think to arrive at the percentage of cost, it's going to be a slightly different number everywhere, and we're going to ask people to, because these transactions will be private, we're going to have to ask people to
Share the price.
share the price.
So I sell my $20,000 dinghy with a $5,000 mooring, and gee, it was only $5,000 transaction cost, not $25,000.
Right.
So
There's-
there are ways to avoid that. So a flat fee, everybody knows what's going on.
Exactly.
Everybody is
It's supposed to
comfortable
be-
with it. Okay, the single name on the mooring, I mean, the tax assessor allows you to own something in joint or a trust to own it. Why is it such a problem? Is it all because the city is not very capable of managing the list of the moorings that we have to do that? Because you could still have 2 names on a mooring ownership or rental agreement and still have 1 point of contact. I mean, it's easy to put into the computer.
Right.
If you're
Yeah, you
competent.
could do that. I
Okay,
think, yeah, I agree. I think this would be a good question for the harbor department in the sense of, in a storm, winter storm, a boat breaks loose, you go to the mooring file, because you're not going to look up their phone number from a CF number or a document, and you go to a mooring file, and there's one person on there that you can go to. So I think it's just the idea of making one person solely responsible for that permit. And then if they're late on,
So it's a property management issue more than anything else. And so if we have reasonable property management, you don't have a problem with multiple names on the ownership.
no, I think it would just be more work. If someone's late on their maintenance, and they get a call, and, well, that's my partner, he hasn't paid his share. And
Yeah, we don't
all
care.
that.
There's a point of maintenance. Okay, and the last item, item 12, mooring revocation. You talk about having a public auction. If the city's maintaining a site for sale, why wouldn't we instead just take the mooring as it became available and throw it for sale on the site? Come up with a formula on how to price it, the last 3 sales, divide by 3, and that's what we start at. And if it doesn't sell in 30 days, we reduce it or whatever. Why have an auction? Why go through the expense?
Well, I know the city already does a boat auction. It doesn't.
Which they hate, which costs money, and and it isn't very practical.
I think auctions settle the question of whether the price, the mooring's sold for the right price.
So you don't really have a preference one way or the other. If we came up with another scheme on pricing and just kept things moving, you don't have a problem with it.
Sure, no, you could do that, but it's just it makes it real clean when you do an auction.
Thank you very much for all your hard work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Dixon.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Brad, for the excellent work of the Harbor Commission, and I appreciate the hard work that they did in the delegation of the responsibility from the council to charge the Harbor Commission to do a study, and I think that's what the Harbor Commission is for, so thank you for fulfilling that role. A couple of questions. Could you elaborate on the consumer price index methodology you used to establish the rate? Did you consider other rate indices, for example?
We did. I can't go into detail, but this was the most compelling. The Newport Mooring Association made a very good presentation. I think you'll see it here tonight. It's very simple, but it just takes a line and extends it out from 1976. CPI goes all the way up. CPI is very commonly used throughout municipalities for these kinds of things, for increases, for establishing increases for rents and other things. So we just felt we couldn't see anything that would work better, but we were totally open to ideas. We're totally open to ideas.
Well, when you spoke and you did your own survey of other harbor management systems, did you learn, were there other indices that other communities use or other harbors use?
Not that I was aware of.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And when you did do these comparison studies, I mean, just clarify what you said earlier, that Newport Beach has one of the highest, if not the highest.
Well, now, for sure.
And what about at the recommended 25 per
I
foot?
think it would be pretty close to, in line, pretty close to San Diego.
Oh, really?
So
And was there do these other cities use a comparison or a formula that is related to the marina rate or the slip rate? Was that unique to?
I've not seen that. That's fairly unique.
Okay.
And they're all different. Cities provide different services. And one of the issues in Newport is that we don't provide the services to command, in my view, a higher rent. So San Diego, for instance, they provide unlimited dinghy storage on the beach. Other places provide racks. Other places provide parking. Monterey provides parking. So one of the things to understand about the moorings in Newport is we don't provide parking, we don't provide dinghy racks, and the reality of keeping a boat on a mooring is it's hard. You have to be a really dedicated boater to, get all your stuff out there to the boat. There's no power, there's no water, you've got to charge your batteries. There are no dedicated docks where you can go and wash down, which we should have in this town. So ultimately, the Harbor Commission, we're looking into these things where we can provide more services for the mooring permittees, and then I think we could look at rate increases, and I think they'd be acceptable if we could provide more service. And right now, if you come in and you don't have access to a waterfront home or a friend, you've got to bring the boat down in your car and get it across the beach and go out and row out to your boat and get out there and
Good luck.
sail and come back in. It's an adventure.
Okay, and a final question. Could you, I guess this is requires a simple answer. Is $55 per foot too high? Yes or no? In terms of your comparison studies and market research?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you again for the good work
Thank
of the
you.
Harbor Commission.
Councilmember Duffy.
I just want to say thank you to you, Commissioner Avery, and to your fellow workers on the commission, Joe and Duncan. Amazing job. I know it took a long time, and I know you took it very seriously, and I'm very proud of you guys and all the people, all the input, as you guys did a very professional job. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll just join the bandwagon and thank you too, because I think the Harbor Commission does a good job and appreciate your work on this, jetpacks and all the other lovely subjects we send down the pike to you.
Well, we appreciate the council's support, and we enjoy what we do. And I'll tell you, I've worked with the commission now for 4 years, and the present commission, we're really enjoying it. We're all, getting along, and everybody's really pulling and really committed to delivering for all users of the harbor. So we've got a good thing going right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, before we open it up for public comment, okay, this is a public meeting to discuss a serious issue, so I'm going to ask you not to applause during the evening, because you're going to hear comments that you like, you're going to hear comments that you may not like. So if you can just hold your emotions, and when you get up, you can, say your piece when you get up to speak. But if you'd please respect that, it would make the evening go a lot smoother. So what we're going to do before we open the public comment is the Mooring Association has asked for the opportunity to make a presentation. So I'll invite their representative to come up at this time and make his or her presentation.
Mayor Selich, councilors, good evening. My name is Patricia Newton. Thank you for allowing this NMA presentation and for your consideration of the Harbor Commission's report. I would also like to thank the Harbor Commission for their commitment to a fair and reasoned process in arriving at their recommendations. My comments describe our support of the Harbor Commission recommendations, information that was not included in the staff report, and some concerns about the Tidelands accounting and capital expenditures. How do I switch the page? Oh, next page, please.
Hey, next page.
The Harbor Commission recommendations are generally fair, reasonable, and based on fact. The major recommendations, as Brad said, we agreed that the annual rate should be set at $25 per linear foot. However, we arrived at this fee by employing 3 methods, not just CPI. The Marina Index should be eliminated as it is an apples to oranges comparison and is unfair given the potential for a 6% increase annually. We agree to preserve the market-driven process. We believe it's reasonable for the City Council to allow mooring permit transfers, and we agree to introducing transparency by reporting sales on a city-run website and limiting the number of transfers and frequency is appropriate. We actually have come to agree that the permit transfer fee being set at 100% of the proposed annual fee is appropriate. It would increase the revenue to the Tidelands Fund, and it also guarantees an appropriate fee when a mooring is transferred with the sale of a vessel. We use 3 measures for annual fees. We base this on information that's relevant, reliable, and professionally endorsed as valid measures for deriving fair market value. And it's also important to note that these 3 measures are approved by the State Lands Commission as valid measures for determining fees. This balanced approach points to a $25 linear foot, which is both defensible and credible. In doing a fair value analysis, you have to keep in mind the Section 1D Beacon Bay Bill. There should be no discrimination in rates. And this goes back to what Brad was referring to with regard to the fee set for the residential docks. We use 3 approaches. The CPI approach is an accepted method for adjusting fees that have been set appropriately. Depending on the base year used, the rate has a range of $21 to $31 given the other valuation methods, the mid-range of $25 we believe is reasonable. The current rate of $55 per linear foot is nearly 3 times the average rate charged in 2015 in other Southern California harbors, most with mooring amenities superior to Newport Harbor. We also used the Rasmussen appraisal effective June 28, 2012, which was also relied on the city for setting a fair value fee for the residential docks for the same use, boat storage. Using the 50-cent rate applied to an area occupied by a mooring and vessel results in an annual range of $21.38 to $25.43. This satellite photo of the J mooring field shows the space occupied by moored vessels. The mooring in this example occupies 2,034 square feet of tidelands, which at 50 cents per square foot translates to $25.43 per linear foot. Going on to permit transfers. A market-driven process allows greater choice of location to suit boater needs, while the waitlist has not served the boating public as envisioned. Transferability must be maintained to allow permit holders to recover acquisition costs paid under current transfer laws. Concerns about profiteering has never really been quantified. However, I think the Harbor Commission proposal alleviates this concern. Mooring transfers are not illegal. It's a matter of council policy. However, value must be given back to the public to support a policy allowing mooring permit transfers. So what's the public benefit? Mooring permittees give back to the public in several ways. Annual fees paid into the Tidelands Fund are the highest of any user group. Vacant moorings are used by visiting boaters, and the fees paid go to the Tidelands Fund. Permittees maintain the mooring tackle to ensure the harbor is a safe haven and safe for navigation for all. Yacht clubs sponsor races and regattas, education, youth programs, and community fundraising activities. So the impact of the Harbor Commission recommendation. With the proposed fee, moorings remain a top contributor to the Tidelands Operating and Capital Fund when compared to to commercial and residential piers. In fact, total contributions will still exceed the combined contributions of both residential and commercial piers, which total about $877,000. The accounting for tidelands raises some questions. I looked into this pretty carefully. $6.1 million for the marina portion, which was the basin and docks of the marina park, was allowed by the state's land commission to be converted to a loan to be amortized over 14 years. So in 2014, why was another $2.9 million apparently expensed to Marina Park? Is there an explanation for this cost, and why was it treated differently from an accounting perspective? It appears the only cost for the marina portion was approved in 2013. I think there's also a question of budget consistency. Over-market mooring fees are not an appropriate solution for harbor budget concerns, especially when such costs may be considered discretionary. Anime respectfully urges the city to avoid budget adjustments which reflect citywide budget adjustments. Examples of such adjustments may be found in the 2014-2015 report, Capital Improvement Program by the numbers, and also in the performance plan, especially in 2011 to 2013 in the category for all other CIP. Next slide, please. Here's the graph of the CIP funding history. This is a graph that's prepared by the Public Works Department. The red line at the top represents the adjusted budget. The yellow line below indicates approved budget. It's clear the city far exceeded the approved budget during the periods of 2009 and 2014. The NMA respectfully requests the city consider the implications of this chart when reviewing future capital expenditures for the tidelands. So finally, our recommendations. The NMA recommends the city adopt Harbor Commission recommendations for moorings, including setting the fee at $25 per linear foot and allowing permit transfers as proposed. We also recommend CPI increases to be capped at 2%, which is the same CPI cap for residential pier fees. We believe this proposal is reasonable and fair.
Okay, thank you. Very well put together presentation. Mr. Kift, do we have an answer to the one question on Marina Park?
I don't. I hadn't seen that question before. We'd have to ask Dan to summarize that for us. I can get
Okay.
that back to you.
Maybe we can look that up and get it
Sure.
later in the meeting. Okay, any questions of the speaker? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, how many folks are going to want to speak tonight? Raise your hands. Okay, there's always twice as many as raise their hands. So if you could maybe line up and we'll go from one podium to the other and just start right now. Please state your name.
Yes, it's Thomas O'Keefe.
Oh, but excuse me, by the way, it'll be a 3-minute limit on speakers.
Yes. I'm Thomas O'Keefe, resident of San Clemente and mooring holder here. I was also a 3-term councilman and mayor of the city of San Clemente. I want to call to the attention of the City Council Proposition 218, which was passed by the voters in 1996. And according to that, and I know the city attorney disagrees with the fact that the fees charged mooring owners are covered by Proposition 218. If they continue to disagree, I would suggest the council get an attorney's opinion from an attorney who knows he will not be hired to litigate any question on that, so that you have a completely unbiased opinion from the outside. But Proposition 218 very clearly states that for any fees or charges or taxes levied by a municipal body, including cities, to be valid, the revenues derived from the fee or charge shall not exceed the funds required to provide the property-related service. Revenues derived from the fee or charge shall not be used for any purpose other than that for which the fee or charge was imposed. The amount or the fee or charge imposed on any person as an incident of their ownership or operation shall not exceed the proportional cost of the service attributable to that party. And in any legal proceeding concerning the validity of a fee or charge, the burden shall be on the agency or city to demonstrate compliance with this article. There are two principal cases involving this, the city of Palmdale and recently the city of San Juan Capistrano. Both those cases involved the city selling a service, in those cases water service, to the populace, and increased the fees without doing a study justifying the fact that the increase was justified by the actual increased cost of rendering the service. Now, if the city attorney believes that the allowing of a mooring fee to be charged to people who own the moorings, that is property, own the anchors and the chains and the rest of it, is not a fee, tax, or service. And the whole purpose of 218 was so that cities and other agencies could not hide taxes without a vote of the people by calling it a fee or a charge or something else. And it clearly includes fees for services. Two cases, city of Palmdale and the city of San Juan Capistrano, a very recent case, both going before the California District Court of Appeals, have upheld the validity of Proposition 218, saying that there has to be a study made so that any increase in costs is justified by the cost of the service and the increase in the cost of that service. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next speaker. Go ahead, someone can speak, step up to the other side here. Go ahead, sir.
John Beatty, resident since 1938, property owner in Balboa, and a mooring permittee since 1980. Since your staff started with history on the mooring things, let me comment on the history of a couple of councils ago that considered our inequitable increase. There had been 3 years of study by your then Harbor Commission and Newport Mooring Association members' input and staff input. And when it came time to consider that, the council at that time, I guess they were listening, but there weren't any questions. There wasn't a give and take. And it left a very bad, bitter taste. Within a couple of months, it was stated by that then council they were going to increase the dock rates. It took them 3 years to get around to that, and then of course the money came into play in the court cases against the city, and the dock rates, I'm not using the word tax, have been rolled back a bit. Now, on the matter of the fee, the $25 I feel is acceptable. You have to understand, we've been paying that for half a dozen years. So we feel like we've been keel-hauled in that sense. I mean, my rate went up from $20 a foot to, I don't know, it's $44 and something a foot now. If you accept that rate and adopt it, which I feel you should, I think you should leave it in place for 5 years to make up for the outrageous amount we've put in. Second item I would like to mention is transparency. I have never seen as was kind of alluded to by the Newport Mooring Association representative, a complete outlining of the money collected from tideland sources and outgo of that money. That would be nice to see, finally. My final comment to you is the superb job of the present Harbor Commission and Chris Miller as a resource director was one of dialogue. They listened to us, and we had an exchange, and it was great. We felt, hey, we're getting some representation. That's what we expect from you folks. Please be representatives of us this time on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Denise Peterson. I'm mooring permit holder, A62. I have been for the last 14 years. I'm an active boater in this harbor, and 14 years ago, when I wanted to buy a boat, the first thing I did was get a hold of a mooring because I needed a place to put my boat. If the mooring fees continue to go up, I will be priced out of Newport Beach and I will have to go somewhere else, and I'd prefer to be in a slip so that my boat's not accosted by sea lions. But I'm not here to profiteer, and I'm not here to keep a derelict boat on a mooring. Nobody wants to see that in the harbor. I maintain an attractive boat, and I want to be able to enjoy Newport Beach and the harbor resources that are here and the amenities. We have many friends from other harbors that come to Newport, and they love coming, spending time on the mooring and on the boat because it's so beautiful here. I just hope that the council will seriously consider the Harbor Commission's recommendations and allow transferability back. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Mike Henn. I'm a resident of Balboa Peninsula. Thank you for your service. I appreciate the great work that the Harbor Commission has done in the last few years, but on the issue of mooring permit recommendations, they got it dead wrong. By virtue of the Beacon Bay Bill and the public trust doctrine, the city has a fiduciary requirement to charge fair market value for use of public tidelands, fair market value determined for Newport Beach. That is exactly what the city did in 2010. I'll send you the staff report. I hope you read it. It clearly establishes a fair market value relationship to the only market-driven numbers in this harbor, which are slip rents. The requirement for market rates also precludes any scheme whereby private parties benefit from the transfer of a public permit. To do so is clear evidence of potential gifting of public funds, contrary to the public trust doctrine. The Harbor Commission's recommendation to cut rates to $25 lacks rational basis related to the fair market value in Newport Beach. The $6 starting point in 1976 is not supported by any evidence that that number represented fair market value at that time. The use of a CPI inflator bears little relation to actual changes in fair market value over time. The increase in slip rents in our harbor and the increase in home values in our city are positive proof of that. The Commission did not present any evidence that shows $25 mooring rent approximates fair market value in Newport Beach. A comparison of straight dollar rents between this harbor and other harbors would be analogous to saying slip rents ought to be the same in Newport Beach as they are in San Diego or any of the other harbors. But they're not. Newport Beach has higher valuation. Given the fact that moorings are still being advertised for sale at prices of $25,000 today, it is clear that even mooring rents of $55 may not be actual market value, much less $25. The Harbor Commission's scope of responsibility is very narrow, focusing on harbor matters. Your scope of responsibility as council members is much broader. Specifically, you must take into account the budgetary impacts of your decisions, and you must also represent the interests of all the residents of Newport Beach. Reducing mooring fees to $25 will result in one of two outcomes: a $1 million cut to harbor funding. I doubt Councilmember Duffield would like that. Or we plug the harbor funding hole with general fund money, causing a reduction to other programs and services that benefit all the residents of Newport Beach. Both of the above are very wrong answers. I urge you not to reauthorize private sale of mooring permits. Mr. Mayor, I may be the only person that speaks here today in view of sort of the public interest. May I have a few more seconds?
Yeah, go ahead. A few more.
Pardon? I urge you not to reauthorize private sale of mooring permits or to cut mooring fees to $25 unless you can show
Let's knock it off.
Unless you can show that anything over that is above fair market value. And the only way you can show that is to have an independent agency or a qualified private professional appraiser do a full appraisal. Please do not be unduly influenced, as apparently the Harbor Commission was, by a small group of very vocal mooring holders, most of whom are not actually Newport Beach residents, and who are acting solely out of self-interest at the expense of our city as a whole.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir. Name, please.
Hello, my name's Dan Gribble, and I will try to keep to my 3 minutes. Thank you, Mayor Selleck and council members, for hearing us today, and I want to thank the Harbor Commission and the NMA for all of their hard work. I think they did a great job, and I think you should listen to them. The last city council that made these changes acted rather like rulers rather than representatives, and I think that you will represent the people who are affected, and the people who are affected in this happen to be the mooring holders, more so than anybody else. I sent a letter to each of you with some of my thoughts. I wasn't going to be here, but I am, so I thought I would, without restating those things, I would like to just hit on some key points. I think the biggest issue here has to do with fairness, and that's been tossed around a lot, that word of fairness, but integrity, doing what's ethical. And I know when I went to get my mooring, I went first to the city and was instructed how to get a mooring by city employees. I then went to the harbor department and was instructed likewise. And then I spent a significant amount of money and bought a mooring. And when they say that there's private profit being made on public assets, the moorings, in fact, were placed by individuals into the bay and are owned individually by private individuals. True, the permit is a lease, but it's a similar situation to somebody who owns a home on leasehold land. And to tell them that they have no value in their home by eliminating the transfer it would be unfair as well. So the one issue is the transfer. I think it's really a matter of fairness. If the city government tells us and the county government tells us this is how you get a mooring, go ahead and write your check and you can have it, and then later takes that away, that's just not fair. It's just not fair, and you have to act fairly. The other thing has to do with the rate. I believe, if the rate was higher, and there's a reason, justifiable reason, that's understood. But I know that dock holders get a better deal than mooring holders. I have a friend who has an 80-foot dock who has a 50-foot boat on it, an 18-foot boat on it, a runabout, and some paddle boards, and he pays less than half the $3,000 I pay per year, which is $3,000, which is 3 times what I paid when the rule was changed. And I'm just saying it needs to be fair. It's the same water, same tidelands. It should be fair. The last thing is, there was a comment made about cutting $1 million out of the budget by reducing the fees. I'm kind of a believer that you should charge what's fair and what is value for value received rather than how much money you need to support the government. How about you look at cutting expenses rather than raising the rates, particularly on the little guys? It's just not fair again. So I would recommend strongly that you adopt the recommendations of the Harbor Commission and keep them in place going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Mike Glenn, resident of Balboa Peninsula. Mike Hinn, also a resident of Balboa Peninsula, just explained that the Beacon Bay Act required us to charge fair market values for slips. Unfortunately, that's not true. In fact, I've asked Mike Hinn on multiple occasions to send me where in that bill it says anything that could be possibly construed like that, and he has been unable to provide that. It's not that it's slightly misinterpreted, it's that it's absent. It's not there. Second, the Tidelands Grant, if you guys have read that. The Tidelands Grant says that all the activity that's generated, all the money activity that's generated from the Tidelands goes to the Tidelands Fund. It cannot be spent anywhere else. That is the equivocal difference between a tax and a fee. Does it go to a generalized fund? This does not. This is clearly a fee. And with fees, it requires a fee study before we raise the rents. It has nothing to do with what anybody in San Diego is paying or LA is paying or Long Beach is paying or San Pedro, wherever. Nothing to do with that. You've got to do a fee study to figure out what we need and how much we're getting. This was done contrary to the law. Now, I know that Mr. Harp over here is the city attorney, and it's his job to make sure that nobody gets in trouble. So I'm sure that he'll say that this is rent or this is a lease, and it's not either a tax or a fee, which are the only two things that are authorized to be taken by California law. His position is that this is a third thing that California law doesn't cover. That's not correct. It is a fee. It goes to a fund that is designed to care for the harbor. And we did not conduct a fee study to figure out what was fair and equitable to have even division amongst before we raised the rates here. That was very wrong of us. I think we should rewind to that and then do a fee study to figure out what is fair, because that's what's required by the law. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Don Potenza, mooring C31 holder for well over 40 years, 43 years, my dad and I. Just an example of how the changes have impacted me and many others. My dad's in his mid-80s. I'm getting up there. We're both on fixed incomes, although I'm doing fine. I've had to take on the entire cost of the mooring fees because my dad can't afford it, which is forcing me to look at selling my boat. But without being able to transfer the mooring, I can't sell it. Where are they going to put it? It's a trimaran, so it needs a mooring. So that's just one impact on one individual. It's happening to a lot of individuals. As far as the fees versus the docks, the tidelands are for everyone. The costs are supposed to be distributed equally. The moorings are paying the brunt of the fees to support the tidelands. I'm not saying that the docks are too cheap or the moorings are not expensive enough, but they should be somewhat closer to each other. My fees have gone up triple in the last 3 years, from $1,100 a year to $3,300 a year, and significantly since we first bought it. That doesn't take into account the mooring tackle fees. We've been good caretakers of that mooring for 40 some odd years. We've always done our upgrades every 2 years as required. That fee has gone from $300 a year to over $1,000 a year. I'm sorry, every 2 years. So the expense has gotten to where it's forcing some people to not be able to utilize it any longer, but you put us in a position where you can't do anything about it. So I'm asking that you really look at considering especially the transfer fees, the transferability, and that the fees become somewhat more reasonable.
Thank you. Go ahead, ma'am.
My name is Elaine Linhoff. I live on the Balboa Peninsula Point. And please forgive me if I repeat something that somebody else has said. I am missing one hearing aid again, but I'll promise to be brief. I just feel that the boaters, and particularly mooring owners, should not have to bear the bulk of the Tidelands budget, because our only cost to the city is for the Harbor Patrol, and the Harbor Patrol does more than just monitor the moorings. The other thing is, if you've been around a long time, you know that I have served in the past on many city committees. And sometimes the city council listened to our recommendations and sometimes they didn't. In this case, I feel that the Harbor Commission has done exhaustive research. They have conducted numerous public hearings, collected a lot of input, and I feel they have come up with reasonable recommendations. So I urge you to listen to the people that you appointed to do a job for you. Thank you.
Yep. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Walcott. In 2010, when the Newport Beach City Council adopted the current fees and structure for transferring the permits, I was a city employee, and therefore I was behind a very high ethical wall. I could not be aware of what was going on or be involved or give my opinion. The reason I was behind that ethical wall is because I have a 50-foot boat, which is kept in a mooring at Newport Harbor Yacht Club. It has been there since 2005. I still have my boat, I still have my mooring, and 4 years post-employment separation, I finally get to give my opinion. City staff works very hard, and so does the city council. You work on an incredible range of issues. You work with good intentions. You work with very tight time constraints. Frequently, generally, you get it right. Sometimes you get it wrong. I think in this case, they got it wrong. I believe in this situation, the city, with all respect to former Councilman Henn, I believe in this situation that the city applied flawed methodology in determining what the rate should be for the moorings. The cost of moorings in Newport Harbor should be an apples-to-apples comparison to moorings in other Southern California harbors. It should not be to a slip. A slip is an entirely different product. It's a different experience. It offers different services, different access. If you have ever tried to provision your boat for a cruise without access to a dock, you will know how difficult it is, and I'm sure there's a lot of people behind me who could tell you what that challenge is. Members of the Newport Mooring Association have given you a lot of information and facts about what the costs are in other harbors. However, everybody to my right, your left, who I used to work with, knows that I don't like relying on somebody else's research, so I did some of my own, which, for those of you who endured it for 7 years, I won't bore you with it, except for one example, which is Shelter Island in San Diego. I could get I called them. I could get a mooring for my boat in San Diego Shelter Island mooring field for $128.17 a month, which is $2.56 a foot, or $30.72 a year. That's almost $25 less a foot than Newport Harbor mooring holders pay. And the San Diego fees, the slightly higher fee that they would charge is justified in the fact that they do their own maintenance. The mooring holders do not have to do maintenance of their moorings, and they provide 24/7 access to the boats. I bring up the Shelter Island example because there's been some discussion of whether or not it is appropriate to consider the environment of Newport Beach in the valuation of a mooring. Shelter Island is immediately adjacent to San Diego Yacht Club, which is equal to any of the yacht clubs in this harbor. It is adjacent to the Point Loma Bayside area. If any of you are familiar with that, it is the equivalent of any of the Bayside areas in Newport Beach in terms of atmosphere and expense. If you're looking for an apples-to-apples comparison, I believe that qualifies. I think it speaks very highly of the integrity and the professionalism of this council and the staff that they are willing to wind this back and look at the issue. I hope that you will adopt the Harbor Commission's recommendations.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, hi. My name is Scott Carlin. I'm a mooring holder, and I'm here to speak about just a couple of points. The reference to the Beacon Bay bill specifically stated that any reference to market value only applied to the rentals of the dirt. The dirt was taken out of the mud and essentially thrown up on the land, and that area was taken out of the tidelands effectively permanently. And there was a negotiation that went on with the state. At the end of the day, the deal was that you can do this, but you got to charge the fair rental value for that dirt that you permanently took out of the harbor. The relevant section is really the 1919 Tidelands grant, and that was also put back in to the Beacon Bay, and it said for the same use of the tidelands, you can't discriminate on your fees. And so that's the applicable reference in the Beacon Bay bill. With regard to that, one of the three methods considered by the Harbor Commission was the tidelands comparative method, where the tidelands have been valued with an appraisal at 50 cents a foot, et cetera, et cetera. That was used in connection with the piers, and it's also been used in connection with one of the three methods that was presented to you today. So the fair value has been presented, and it has been with the rectangle and so forth and so on, shown to be an approximately $25 a foot. That's fair, that's reasonable, based on science, not based on myth. With regard to the comment by the person who talks about comparative approach and Newport being special, I authored the comparative approach, which I have extra copies, which was presented to the commission, and it was one of the three methods considered. That studied San Diego in particular. And what we did there, what I did, was we made an adjustment. So we actually increased it because, true enough, Newport slips cost more than San Diego slips, 20, 30%, whatever it may be, particularly if you use the basket approach. So you bring it up by that 20 or 30%, but then you have to lower it down because of the lack of access. Just like a house with a pool is worth more than a house without a pool. So then you lower it down, you make that adjustment. Those adjustments were made in the same report. At the end of the day, we have the apples-to-apples comparison based on comparables. And we do have the fair value when you consider not only other harbors, but making the adjustment for Newport. And that is available, it was presented to the commission, is available to the council members. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Bayhan. I also hold a mooring here in the harbor, and I have written to you already as the Commodore of a local yacht club that works very, very hard on modest cost accessibility to yachting in Newport Beach. So I won't belabor everything I said in my letter. Let me first say thank you, Brad, and the rest of the Harbor Commission for their incredible patience with us, all us mooring people going to those meetings and carping at them. But I want to make a couple just real simple points that I think anybody know, in this room, everybody pretty much knows are true in their gut. One of those things is that in Newport Beach, if you can afford a slip, you have one. That is the bottom line, because getting your access to boating or yachting in Newport Beach through a mooring is very, very difficult. It is the case that we have virtually no services in this harbor. So you got to be careful with the comparisons you want to make to other venues, because it is very difficult. We have very limited dinghy access, no water, no power, limited parking, limited docks, as was pointed out, for washdowns and other necessary support services. Yachting should not be synonymous with the word wealthy. And the only thing in Newport Beach that keeps them from being synonymous, as they are in the popular culture, is the mooring field. But it's got to be the mooring field priced at a reasonable amount of money. Because at the rates you're charging, you're forcing the middle class out of boating in Newport Beach. And again, I say, I don't need to look at studies to tell you that you know in your gut that that's wrong.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name's Randy Timmons. I own one of the moorings, J78. Yeah, I don't know if that's the right term, but my brother bought it years ago. I'm not sure, 13, 14 years ago. He lived on Lido Isle for 25 years. He passed away maybe 2.5 years ago. And he was a good citizen, you know. We're kind of opposite. I had truck driving jobs, welder, electronic tech, stuff like that. So, you know, I'm on a fixed income today, retired, and my grandpa, right after World War II, had the Betty Lou built here at Larson Shipyard, and he had taken it to San Diego, and it was the biggest sport fishing boat in the fleet before the new Loan. And so this is where I plan to, I'm a Christian, so I'm planning on living here until the Lord takes me, So I'm on a fixed income, and it hurt me a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening. My name is Gary Pickett. I'm with Ardell Marina, and I hadn't planned on speaking this evening, except there was an open microphone, and I've never met a microphone I didn't love. So I don't have a mooring. I never anticipate having a mooring. I know one gentleman that is a former client of mine that does have a mooring, so I really don't have a, quote, dog in this fight, other than the fact I felt compelled to speak once former city council member Mike Hand came up. And I admire Mike's courage and his belief. Unfortunately, those beliefs are based upon two terribly flawed appraisals that were done in 2010 that use incorrect assumptions with regard to occupancy rates and slip rates. Furthermore, they use market comparisons of other leases that should not be used. They are not apples to apples comparisons on those other leases. So the appraiser's market analysis are incorrect. Lastly, there was no economic analysis in Mr. Netzer's appraisal, and there is an appraisal that the city of Newport Beach paid for in 2001, prepared by a renowned appraiser that knows the marina in Newport Harbor inside and out, and that's George Jones. And I plead that the city council take a look at that appraisal And I thank you very much for taking another look at this and these rates for these people. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I'm John Ponick. I own a mooring here in the F field. I was very shocked at the basically the tax you're charging as your fee. I agree with the Harbor Commission's recommendations. I think that would be a lot more fair. However, I would like to see something in line with what the residents on the beach moorings are paying. And I'd like to say that they're perfectly right that the slip has nothing to do with it, because there's many amenities that the moorings will never have. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Cindy Bowman, and I am a mooring holder. My husband actually built our boat 34 years ago. It was on Lido Island for like 18 years in an actual slip. We got priced out of Newport. We ended up going to San Diego for 5 years. We came back when we were able to buy a mooring, and we've had the boat on here for about 5 years now, again. Anyway, I'd like to thank the committee for everything that they did. They were awesome. They listened to us. We actually, I think, had some fun doing it. You know, I've been at every one of these meetings. I agree with everything that they were recommending, but I do have a couple of other suggestions possibly. With the issue with not being able to have more than one person listed and having a primary contact, I totally agree with that. You need to have a one-person point person. I happen to be a systems analyst, though, and the site could be changed to have a primary contact and then a secondary contact. So that would be one thing that could be changed. The other thing would be as far as the equitable rates and the parking that we don't have, you know, compared to San Diego and some of the other facilities. If each mooring holder would be given a permit for parking anywhere, not blue poles, just parking anywhere. Every year when they provide their funds to give in return a parking permit. So those are my recommendations. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor, council members, my name is Brian Ozonian. I feel like I'm General Custer standing here. I'm a 40-year mooring permittee, and how pleased I am that you're reviewing and taking comments considering changing the mooring fees in Newport Harbor. It is long overdue and very welcome. After being deeply involved with the dock tax issue and attending all the recent excellently run Harbor Commission meetings on the mooring fees, I'm compelled to speak to this issue specifically with regard to my position on the fee structure. During the dock tax issue debates, many mooring permittees requested equal treatment. At that time has now come. I am in favor of a significant reduction. However, I am in opposition to the Mooring Association's recommendation for the fee, which I am a member of that association. And the reasons are that it does not go far enough in reduction, it does not comply with the requests of the permittees during the dock tax debate, and it is out of touch with the precedent recently established with regards to the dock tax. As we are all aware, there is no formula or standard of care set by any authority as to how the fees are to be constructed or structured, which includes state and city. Therefore, we have a wide open opportunity to set our own reasonable and fair rate structure in Newport Harbor. As I have testified and offered up numerously in the recent Harbor Commission meetings, here is my request. Charge 50 cents a square foot of the shadow of the vessel, not the whole mooring field, the vessel itself, in the mooring, since each mooring must have a boat registered to the mooring, even though it may not be in the mooring full time. Add a $2 per foot charge of bow and stern line to each mooring can. An example for a 50-foot boat would be 25-foot boat by 8 feet wide, 192 square feet at 50 cents a foot is $100. Add the bow and stern line, it's another $50. That's a total annual fee of $150. That's $6 a lineal foot for the boat. Not 25, not 55, it's $6. The 50-cent square foot rental rate came from the recent City Council action regarding the private piers and relates to the shadowing of the bay bottom. It has been established as a harbor precedent, albeit for private piers. The basis is the same. The line charge seems fair and justifiable. As different sized boats come in and out of a mooring, the adjustments to the permit fee can be therefore easily calculated by the harbor master. Note that the area in this formula is rectangularly measured and does not consider the curvature of the shape of the hull. In comparison to docks, there is obviously, and much testimony has been provided with regards to the moorings being difficult to access, take much more effort to clean, to enjoy, maintain, and protect from sea lions. The vessel and the mooring cans are also more likely to be damaged by harbor vessels and also the Harbor Patrol placed visitors, whereby dangers go unreported. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Well, good evening, Honorable Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council and city staff and everybody standing behind me. We've had a lot of time together in the last few months, and that's been a good thing. You had to be there at the meetings that the Harbor Commission held, and I know you have more to do than I don't know how you get it all done, just being city council people. But if you were there, you heard the fair-minded nature of the 99% of the folks there. If you had some more extreme ideas, and I respect those too, but these people are professional, they're honest, they care about the harbor. People standing behind me, there's a wide range of talents, and those talents were brought to bear on studying this, and the harbor commissioners did listen until finally people ran out of wanting to talk, and that's a good thing. If you want to heal what happened a few years ago, the way to do it is to show the respect to the Harbor Commission that you appoint. So I urge you to do that. And I think I'll just stop there. Please honor the Harbor Commission. They did a fabulous process, and that process is important to our being happy as neighbors in this town. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to council. Anyone want to speak? I'm not seeing anyone jumping. Councilmember Curry?
I hope everybody in the audience had the opportunity to pick up a copy of the letter that we received today from the State Lands Commission. And let me just ask, it's asking that we delay this action. And it states that the commission staff would like to know how the proposed mooring rates relate to the value of the property and whether those rates reflect fair market rent. They'd also like further information about potential sale of moorings, including the city's views of these actions as consistent with the terms of its legislative granting statute and the common law public trust doctrine, which I think is where the idea of fiduciary responsibility for fair market rent is contained. Let me, staff, have you had an opportunity to review this letter? I think many of you remember back in January, we talked about the issue of the State Lands Commission and the sort of be careful what you ask for position, because if we raise the issue there, and we saw how they deal with dock holders in Huntington Harbor and in Lake Tahoe and in other places where the State Lands Commission has direct jurisdiction for these, those fees are higher than they are here. And we run the risk, if we raise the issue in the wrong way, that the State Lands Commission will come in and take jurisdiction and do this in a way that none of us, I think, would be happy with. So as much as I would like to resolve this issue tonight, as I know everybody here would too, I guess I would ask the staff, would it be prudent, and I'm trying to learn the lessons of the fire rings situation, where we got crosswise between two state agencies who had some strong views. Now we're within three agencies about how the issue ought to be handled. And without setting the stage for the State Lands Commission to come in and second-guess whatever decision the council should be made, I guess I should ask staff, would it be prudent for us to delay this in view of the request of the Lands Commission?
Mr. Curry, I reviewed the letter too, which came in at about noon, and I do respect what they have to say. They're our landlord. I think you have a couple of options. One would be to formulate some thoughts for us and have us discuss that with the Lands Commission staff. You can't actually take an action tonight besides giving us direction, because whatever this is has to be wrapped up in a resolution. And I know we would be happy to do that if that was your direction.
Okay, Councilmember Duffy.
Well, I have this. Aren't you supposed to be playing Curry basketball tonight?
That's my brother.
Oh, your brother. Sorry. Darn, I wish I had the right guy. So since you brought this up, I have something completely different to say. So I'm wondering if my fellow council members would want to continue discussing the letter.
Councilmember Muldoon.
Mr. Kift, did someone from the city contact the State Lands Commission regarding this issue?
No, sir.
So you did not contact the State Lands Commission regarding this issue?
I did not.
Last week you did not?
I did not.
Mr. Torres, did you have a chance to speak with the State Lands Commission recently regarding this issue?
I received a phone call today from staff letting me know that we were going to be receiving a letter today.
And did they tell you how they felt about us reviewing the rates in the harbor?
Staff indicated that they would like a chance to at least speak more with us before a final decision was made by the City Council.
Regarding the State Lands Commission staff and that conversation with them, do they indicate to you that they would expect that we'd still move forward?
They indicated that they apologized for getting the letter to us so late today, and they realized that we weren't taking a final action, and that if the council did move forward with giving direction today, there would be an opportunity to speak more with staff prior to any type of final action from the City Council.
Are you familiar with other jurisdictions that have the same arrangement with the State Lands Commission?
Other trustees?
Yes.
Yes.
And is it common practice that these entities are allowed to just dictate their own rates?
I guess I can't speak intimately to every jurisdiction of how they set our rates, but I can tell you, at least for the city of Newport Beach, it's to the discretion of the city council how they come up with the fair market value, as long as it's based in part upon the findings of an appraiser.
So let's say in this scenario, assuming for some reason State Lands Commission would break away from precedent, in your legal opinion, could you please outline the procedures they would have to go through to do what Mr. Curry is afraid that they would do to take away our trustee status?
So I have no indication now, at least, that there's any threat from the State Lands Commission. They're coming in to take away our tidelands. If they did want to do that, there's a provision within the Beacon Bay bill where there's a public hearing by the State Lands Commission. We would have an opportunity to address any concerns they might have. Findings after the hearing would be referred to the Attorney General if they still feel there's a violation, and then the Attorney General could file a action in Superior Court to actually take away our tidelands. So it's a multi-step process.
So outside the multi-step process, did they indicate that that was something they were considering or a real threat to us in addressing our rates?
No, I'm not aware of that at this time, at least not from my communications with staff.
Moving on just briefly, regarding requiring that the fees be somehow tied to an appraisal. Can you speak more about that?
Our municipal code in Title 17 requires that the rates charged for tidelands uses be fair market value, and in determining those fair market values, it requires the City Council to base it, at least in part, upon the findings of an appraisal.
And we have a couple of appraisals already conducted, is that correct?
The last appraisal that I'm aware of that's specifically on moorings is from 2006.
2006. So as long as it's in part, I interpret that as being fulfillment of it. I want to cede my time and come back to some other issues, but that I think addresses the State Lands Commission and their understanding that we still can discuss with them what we decide to pass this evening and giving them a chance to have input without any real threat to our trustee status. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Michael, as long as you're on the mic, I'll ask you a question related to this letter, which I find oddly coincidental that it would arrive like a Hail Mary pass or something at the 11th hour. Because I know we have ongoing conversations and relationships with the State Lands Commission, so this was a publicly available agenda, so I don't know, maybe they just got around. Suddenly they were curious what Newport Beach City Council was going to be studying today. But anyway, having said that, in their letter, they would appreciate, I don't see a mandate here, they would appreciate the opportunity to discuss with the city the proposed modifications to the mooring permit policies and fee structures. So my understanding of what we're doing tonight, is to consider a resolution, which in my mind would be a proposed modification. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, what we are discussing and will continue to discuss until we come to the point of a resolution is in due course what we should be doing. And if it is recommended, not mandated, that we run it by the State Lands Commission, I would have no objection to that, whatever it is that we propose. Is that correct? And in terms of what we come forward tonight with a resolution, the contents of that resolution may involve several steps. Staff may have to do some fine tuning, et cetera. But if it were to go to the State Lands Commission, that does not preclude what we need to do in terms of the discussion of the recommendations of the Harbor Commission this evening.
That's absolutely correct. So if I understood the question, first let me say we have a great relationship with the State Lands Commission, their staff, and they're very helpful, and they might be watching us right now, as a matter of fact, and they're just fantastic, and they want to do whatever they can do to help us. I can't say enough good things about the State Lands Commission.
I agree.
and again, I think all they would like to do, they recognize it's within the City Council's discretion to set the rates here. They just want to see what assistance they can provide to us. They have their own moorings up in Lake Tahoe. They have experience. They're going through similar processes themselves throughout the state to set the rates. But you're absolutely correct. They just want to be part of the discussion. So to the extent City Council wants to move forward tonight, the State Lands Commission staff recognizes that. They don't want to stop you. They just want to participate as the process goes forward.
Did they participate the last time the council dealt with this a few years ago?
We did speak with them about what the proposals were, yes.
At approximately this point in time, after the council developed the proposals?
Before and after, yes.
Did the staff seek their input, or were they watching on TV and realized that this was an opportunity for them to participate in our process?
They do both.
Okay. One other question, and this may be to Chris or Shannon, or to the mooring representative, but if you could validate this. So in their slide presentation, they talked about, I will use the word burden, that the mooring fees bear in the funding the capital improvement program for the harbor infrastructure. And I just would like you, Chris or Shannon, to validate those numbers. In the Tidelands Operating Fund, the statement here is that moorings contribute $692,000, residential piers $117,000, and commercial piers $231,000. Are those numbers correct?
Can I speak to that? Because I was looking at that while the public testimony was going on, in light of what a couple of folks said. People forget what goes into the Tidelands Fund. And yes, moorings of the 3 boating categories, residential piers, commercial piers, and moorings themselves. Mooring right now is the highest because the commercial pier ramp up hasn't occurred yet. This is the first year of it. However, it's probably 4th in terms of revenue sources. The biggest is the Balboa Bay Club. They pay $3 million worth of rent. And for the gentleman that spoke about all monies going to the Tidelands or fees, that's not true. The State Lands Commission approved the Balboa Bay Club's lease and helped us set that rental amount. The second one is the Beacon Bay residences, what the Beacon Bay bill is named after. They actually pay about $1.808 million into the Tidelands Fund. Oil revenue is another big one, about $2 million a year, so that exceeds moorings. Parking alone is $3.4 million into the Tidelands Fund, with the Balboa Pier parking lot being $1.9 million of that.
Well, that was an excellent answer. It told me a lot more than I'm glad to know because, frankly, Dave, thank you that in terms of the argument that is being made that by reducing the mooring fees, we're going to severely crimp our capital improvement program spending going forward. There are other sources of revenue, point number one, that will be coming into the Tidelands Capital Fund and Operating Fund, but also back to the point I was intending to make about the, in my opinion, amongst the moorings, the residential piers, and the commercial piers, which I consider kind of the one basket of similar items, the mooring share of that basket is highly disproportionate, I believe, to what should be the case, and that's as a result of the dramatic increase in their fees. And not only just listening to some of the emotional comments this evening, but the very practical and objective comments, fact-based comments about how the fees came about to be increased a few years ago, and I will go on record to say that I question that, not intending any disrespect to the former council or the council persons that sat on that council. I'll just state my principle is that I do not feel that any one of these three sections should be forced to bear the total burden of the Tidelands Capital Fund. And I know Councilman Duffy has raised this point previously, to look at the expenditures that are paid from that fund, because I think that will be a good examination. Plus, I would say, as we learned in the budget discussion a few weeks ago, that, for example, that line item for the Central Avenue Pier, $400,000, that's no longer on the books, was kind of just a placeholder number. So I guess if we're going to, I think the tail is wagging the dog, that we come up with these numbers in the Tidelands Capital Improvement Program that are just placeholder numbers. We haven't done any detailed analyses of what a pier, a harbor, a seawall is going to cost. I think they're all probably important infrastructures that need to be maintained and, if indeed, replaced at the appropriate time. But they're not accurate costs. And that budget, the Tideland Capital Improvement Budget, is determining the fees that these entities are required to pay into that fund. So point number one, I think those other items that you listed, Dave, are important revenue sources that need to be considered in terms of how we look at future expenditures charged against the capital fund. And I will conclude these long comments by saying I do not believe that the mooring holders that we should increase fees on the shoulders of the mooring holders, and there should be a more equitable fee somewhere in these fair market value assessments that we will be discussing tonight. So thank you.
Councilmember Duffy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the letter, I called Sherry. She's my new best friend. You're a great person, Sherry, wherever you are. There's a phone number here. It said contact me, so I called her. And I said to her, gee, golly whiz, nice timing. I think this was 3 hours before we were going to meet. So that's an incredible timing issue. But my biggest question was to her, okay, if you're going to come and discuss this with us, who are us? Who are you going to call? And she told me, well, I can't talk to you, all your council people. That's just too difficult. So I'm going to talk to Dave Kiff, your city manager. So I thought, wow, okay, you're gonna. So now all of this will be on the shoulders of our city manager to convey whatever it is that the majority of this council would like to convey. And I know Dave will do a great job explaining this to Sherry, but it is kind of daunting to know that now we're in the hands of our city manager to get this tackled with Sherry, and it's quite daunting to come all this time and all this way and realize that we're at this juncture with that. Having said that, do people want to continue talking about the letter, or are we done?
You're the only person in the queue, so.
Okay. So I have
a
chance to just bore you once again with what everybody already said, and I'm going to do it. because I feel it's necessary that you know that I, 2 years ago or 3, had a mooring for 18 years. So I am a very experienced mooring person. And I'm going to say the same things you guys said, but I'll try to say it as fast as I can. But I want to support the Harbor Commission's suggestion, of course, of the mooring issues, transfers, and fees. And I believe the Commission has been super sensitive to all those involved, and their conclusions are sound and logical. Our mooring fields, and you've heard this before, are unique to all other harbors in many ways. First, we have mooring fields that are miles apart from each other. Well, a couple, 2.5, 3, but that's miles. Next, we have located 50% of the moorings where the parking is so tight that residents can barely find a parking place, let alone for a boatload of friends off to enjoy themselves on a weekend outing. The city does not provide, and this has been said before, a method for you to get on your boat for the majority of the mooring holders. We just say it's your problem, you figure it out. Other harbors provide methods to store dinghies to all their mooring users. Not Newport. Really, Keith, honestly. We do not provide a way to wash down the boats, do maintenance work, charge batteries, or take on water. I do not count the public docks with pump-out machines as a work dock for mooring holders. The majority of public docks are not accessible by yachts. People fishing on the docks do not readily pull up their lines, stop fishing so you can tie up, making it challenging to use the dock. Filling up with fresh water from a sewage pump-out dock is slightly hard to swallow. And there's no indication that we promote this activity on any public dock for mooring holders. For all intents and purposes, no water. Due to the geographical locations of the mooring fields and having multiple size moorings, using a wait list simply does not work. In Santa Cruz Harbor, all the moorings are in one place, all the same size, wait list works. You want a mooring that fits your boat, and you want it in a location that fits your needs. Those two components make it impossible to wait for a mooring. You simply cannot be guaranteed you'll get what you want, and declining a mooring when one comes up may mean years before the one you want becomes available. This is unique to our harbor. The general plan says the moorings are to be made available as a low-cost alternative to boat storage, so we open up boating to more people. It does not say to charge the most we can to help pay for capital improvement projects within the harbor. There is no need to replace one single of the 10 public dock floats or gangways that's listed in the CIP report. They are fine as they are. I built docks. I'm building one now. I am an expert in the dock world. They are fine as they are. They're not sinking. They don't look bad. That's $800,000. The $400,000 dinghy dock can be made for $100,000, and half of it we can probably get from the developer who's building out Lido Village at the moment. So there's your $1 million you lose when adjusting the annual permit fee down, in my opinion. I will be supporting the Harbor Commission's findings.
Councilmember Curry.
All right, we'll get it, Tuffy. Well, first of all, I had a very cordial conversation this morning with my friend Carter Ford and with Paul Bahan from the South Shore Yacht Club, and I appreciate the perspectives of everybody tonight on this issue, and I understand that none of us want to pay more for the service, and all of us believe that we deserve to get the high-quality service that Newport Beach is known for. But the fact of it is that we had a 20-year period where the council did not adjust fees, and that's the council's fault. And that's why these fees were, to so many people, onerous, because if you wait that long and then adjust them to where the market's moved over a 20-year or 2-decade period, they've moved a long way, and that was part of the calculation for that. Now, the fact of it is, we don't set the fees based on the capital program, Ms. Dixon. They're based on the methodology that we did. In fact, the capital program far exceeds the revenues that we have. We put $6 million into dredging the harbor, most of that, all of that, coming from general fund revenues because the Tidelands resource was not adequate. Next week, we're going to talk about the issue of seawalls. No matter whether we pick the $10 million option or the $60 million option, the cost of addressing the seawall issue is going to exceed the amount of Tidelands revenues. So the adjustment, it's a matter of math, is $1 million decision based on what's been proposed by the Harbor Commission. So the issue there, and I appreciate Councilmember Duffield suggesting ways where it could be cut, although I'm not sure that that's the right methodology for determining the cost of the docks, but seawalls or public piers or dredging or lower castaways. One of those things has got to change. And that's just for next year. The question becomes, where do we get the $1 million for the following year? Now, Mr. Piotr has proposed that we cut the library and fire station and reduce policing. Mr. Muldoon suggested eliminating the West Side Community Center as one alternative for addressing these needs. Councilman Duffy suggested that we turn the beaches over to the state at the last council meeting and let them run them, although I'm not sure he understands that they're going to want money that goes with that, including the $1 million or $2 million that the parking lot generates. So we've got some financial issues. This is a money issue. So if my colleagues want to do this, I hope, as Duffy suggested, that we identify where we're going to cut the budget to do it. Now, on the issue of transferability, it's interesting because when we have the discussion on residential docks, Mr. Muldoon raised the issue of the U and suggested that people can sail their boat into your U-shaped dock, and as long as they don't touch the sides, they can enjoy the Lido Island lifestyle because it's public water underneath. But now we have the position that, in fact, your mooring that's absolutely water, there is no thing around it, is private and can be bought and sold to the next person, much like but it's a public asset. I think that's an illogical situation, but I understand that people have invested in it and want their money back, and so I'm willing to concede on that. And let's find a way, let's have an appropriate transfer fee, and I'm not sure that what's proposed here is appropriate, but let's have an appropriate transfer fee that reflects the value of that, 5%, 10%, I don't know, of the value of the mooring, because they're now being advertised for $40,000 plus. And I appreciate the fact that people have equity there that they want to maintain. So let's find a way to do that, but let's find a way to adjust the fee that's appropriate. And then let's look at the fee. I think we backed into this $25 fee, and I think it ought to probably be more. I'm willing to cut the fee. Perhaps the council, I'll say, did go too far. But it ought to be probably, I think, in the $35 to $40 range. And if we can find that, that reduces the hit to the funding for these other important projects by $400-some-thousand a year, and makes it easier for the council to adjust that and deal with the other capital programs that we need to do in the harbor. We could have a pier for people coming in and out, specifically on moorings, if we have the resources to make those kinds of investments. So I would be supportive of adjustments in the fee. I hope my colleagues would too. But let's recognize that we can't really step up to $1 million here and continue to fund the projects and maintain the services in the Tidelands that the people expect of us to do without significant damage either to the general fund and the general fund funded programs or to the programs that we fund in the Tidelands.
Councilmember Muldoon.
Thank you. As people already gathered, we hold the Tidelands in a trust. We don't do so just on behalf of the city of Newport Beach. We do so on behalf of the state. That includes people who live outside of the city and those who live inside the city. I respectfully understand where Mr. Curry is coming from regarding the budget. I do not believe it's ethical or fair to treat the harbor as an ATM for the city projects. I do believe that there's a balance point we can find, though, and I think it's important that we be above board because I do know State Lands Commission is going to have a say in the procedure. What I would like to submit with a couple amendments, if the council is ready for a motion to be passed or to be discussed, would be to accept the recommendations of the Harbor Commission, which is items 1 through 13, with two caveats that still can be discussed, assuming that the most controversial issues can be somewhat christened or blessed by the State Lands Commission, although I don't think we have to worry about them in that respect. So the only caveat would be that the linear cost per foot would be $35, which would put us at the highest in the state. So I don't see how the State Lands Commission could have a problem with our number. And it certainly is equitable. And that the transfer at the time of sale would be, I believe, 10% of value would be fair. And again, we still can discuss it. And we can still have input from State Lands Commission, from citizens after this resolution is passed, if it's passed as is. But I can at least throw that out for now and see if we can come to a consensus.
I will second that motion.
Okay, Councilmember Piotr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's funny how once politicians get money, it's so hard to give that tax money back. The Beacon Bay grant, particularly where we've got our residents, to use former Councilman Henn's logic, that would mean those people who have leased land, when they sell their home, they shouldn't get anything for it, because he really wants, if you can sell your mooring for any value, then the rent's too low. You should be charging more. The city's leaving money on the table. You apply that to those same Beacon Bay houses, and that would mean that you bought your house for $1.8 million. You can't sell it for anything more, even if the market goes up, unless the city gets the cut. And we should raise the rent to make sure we get the cut. I had a good conversation with Assemblyman Harper's office today, and he, made a big effort in campaigning against Mr. Curry on the reduction of the dock and mooring taxes, and he wanted to let us know that he was in support of that. But he also wanted to let us know that any help or assistance that we might need with the State Lands Commission, that his office is ready and available to help us. And I think it's kind of ironic how the State Lands letter talks about they represent all of California and not just some select few. I presume he's referring to Newport Beach residents. But the moorings are, as we've heard tonight, widely used by non-Newport Beach residents. And as Duffy said, it provides kind of an entry-level or more of affordable boating experience for people. And that applies a lot to outside Newport Beach. So, if the State Lands Committee was approaching this like the Coastal Commission, where they're requiring low-income housing, low-income temporary housing, as in the Lido Hotel, or maybe even low-income fire pits, State Lands would be all in favor of having a low mooring rate here. So again, now it's the bureaucrats that don't want to, how different they feel when it's tax money that they're letting go and they don't want to let go of it. So I am in favor of the motion. I think that, yes, the staff should be coming back to us with a resolution, and in the meantime, trying to work out issues with State Lands, if any, with Mr. Harper willing to stand in and assist if necessary. I would like to propose an amendment that we delete item number 2 so that we don't limit the number of transfers. And I would also like to delete number 4 so that we can allow multiple parties to have their names on the lease, as we refer to it. And a clarification on number 6, it says no fee required for mooring transfers between family or trust. I think you want to put direct family in there, similar to what the tax assessor uses for doing that. So I propose those amendments on item 2 and item 4 to delete those.
Is that acceptable to you, Councilmember Muldoon? No, Councilmember Petra seconded it.
Could we have some discussion on it? I'd like to hear from Duffy on this.
Okay.
I really feel that it's important to send a message that we don't want to make people trying to make a profit on this. So on that issue, I'd like to keep it the way that Harbor Commission has suggested.
Okay, let's go back to the queue. Councilmember Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to propose to Councilman Duffy an additional amendment to your original motion, and just want to add, I agree with keeping those items 1 through 13. I agree with the $35 per linear foot rate and the 10% transfer fee. I would also like to add, so we could create an index measurement for how this tracks going forward in terms of rate increases, to look at the CPI and embed that, or this will be a creative thought here, our friends at the State Lands Commission, who are just willing, ready, and able to participate with us, I understand they produce every 5 years a benchmark appraisal of commercial and mooring rates in Newport Harbor. I think if I'm correct, the last one they did was in 2011. If we determine that the State Lands Commission prepares such a benchmark survey every 5 years, I would recommend to your resolution that we incorporate the State Lands Commission's own work in their 5-year survey or a combination of the CPI. And maybe this is something that staff needs to resolve with state lands, but I understand that the benchmark survey that they do every 5 years is a reliable measurement of the fair market value in the harbor. So that's a long-winded amendment, but it's that CPI index or State Lands Commission measurement as the index tool. Thank you.
Councilmember Muldoon.
Procedurally, I'll accept Councilwoman Dixon's amendments. Just to go back, I think Piotr did have a good one that I want to discuss further. I would defer to Councilman Duffield regarding the restrictions on the number of times you can transact within a year. But I do think it would be okay to have 2 names on it, and I do think that the change for immediate family would be appropriate. I'm not sure, Mr. Mayor, how you do that procedurally, but I wanted to incorporate those 2 aspects of Mr. Piotr's amendments.
Okay, is someone in staff keeping track of all this stuff so that we can be sure that we don't have any flying Elvises?
Okay. So
hang on a second. Councilmember Petros seconded the motion. Are you okay with those?
Yeah, and I will, for clarification purpose, I will, as a seconder, will accept the amended motion to include a $35 linear foot charge with a 10% transaction fee on a go-forward basis to include either CPI or the 5-year state lands index assessment with the added amendment to allow 2 names on the permit.
Okay, we all clear on that?
And direct family?
And direct family.
Okay, Councilmember Curry.
Well, I rise to support Mr. Muldoon's motion. I think it's actually a pretty good compromise given where we've come on this issue. Presumably, as we've now given this policy direction, staff will have the opportunity to sort of vet this with the State Lands Commission before it comes back in a resolution. I think that resolves the points raised in their letter, and we'll have the opportunity to have the benefit of their input. I agree with Councilmember Duffield that if we allowed multiple flipping, what happens is people would, wealthy investment funds would flip these moorings and drive the cost of them up, which would make moorings more unaffordable to people if we had this more often than 1-year transfers, and I don't think we want any of that. So I think the motion's been put together pretty well.
Mayor Pro Tem Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. One final technical addition to the 2 names. I think one of the speakers made a good suggestion to have, I would recommend primary and secondary. So in terms of contacting, there's a primary person and then there's a secondary person. If that makes it just process-wise easier to identify people to contact. Sounded like a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Petros.
Yeah, I've been kind of quiet this whole time, but I do want to say that I do appreciate the good work of the Harbor Commission. I have given them lauds for many of the tasks they do. I also want to thank 21st Century Technology, because while I was attempting to enjoy 2 weeks away in Europe, I was following this on my iPad and iPhone and iGigs and iGags. So I appreciate all the efforts that have been undertaken. And really, this is one example of democracy working. I believe that and again, no disparagement to the prior councils, but I think that the prior council did overshoot the mark and maybe wasn't listening to the public. I think that now we see that the public has spoken and the representation is there. I think this is a great way to compromise, and I commend my council member colleague Muldoon for the wonderful compromise here, and we move forward on this. So thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? I will be supporting the motion also, although I am not completely comfortable with all the components of it, but since we are going to be doing this review with State Lands Commission, give us a chance to take a look and test it out and see if it makes sense. Picking $35 a square foot or linear foot is just like grabbing a number out of the air, so I'm not sure exactly what that means. And the whole issue of transferability, I have some mixed feelings on that part of it. So I'm not sure how I'll vote when the final resolution comes or what form it's going to be in, but for the purposes of getting it teed up, I think it makes sense to go ahead and have some kind of something that State Lands can look at, because I'm looking at this letter and it says they want to do their review before the final decision, so it gives them something that's framed up to look at and take a review as opposed to a whole lot of different options out there. So I'll be supporting the motion. So with that, please vote.
The motion carries unanimously, 7-0.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break and allow you all to exit, and then we'll come back and deal with the second item on the agenda. Hey, Tony, how you doing?
I'm watching it.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to call the council back to session. We will now move on to item number 2, and this is listed on the staff report is Civic Center Audit. Staff?
Mr. Mayor and council members, I think your staff report is fairly self-explanatory, at least I hope it is. And I know that Councilmember Muldoon and Mayor Pro Tem Dixon had asked for this information, and I hope I characterized what they desired. And I guess I'd stop there and welcome any questions you might have.
Okay. Any questions of our city manager? I don't see anybody queuing in here with any questions. I'll open it up to public comment. Any public comment, please come forward.
Mike Lynn, resident of Balboa Peninsula. I have concerns that that the scope here is not nearly what it needs to be. We're talking about doing basically just auditing the materials. We've got a guy right now that's under the investigation by the Orange County DA. You guys sent him there because you guys thought that there was enough evidence to do so. There needs to be something far more substantial to be looked into, a forensic audit. Now, this has also got a budget of $100,000. A forensic audit is going to cost about $250,000, which coincidentally is about 1% of what we're going to wind up paying for all of this. We've got this is not what we want. Initially, we asked for an audit. City asked the city to review itself. We got a thumbs up. That's not what we wanted then. We wanted a forensic audit. We've got this now, which is very limited in scope. It's still not what we want. And what I don't want to have is us be in a position to where we say we want an audit and the city investigates itself and gives itself thumbs up. And we say, no, we really want a forensic audit. And they give this and they say, well, you know, whatever, it's a thumbs up. And then we say, no, we really want a forensic audit. And then the city says, look, we did the self-investigation. We did this one with very big restrictions on it. So what, you know, every time we turn around, you want another one. I've wanted a forensic audit, as has the public, since the beginning. This doesn't qualify as a forensic audit. This is just asking people to review the expenses and making sure they add up properly. That's not what we want. There's a guy under investigation by the DA, our former city manager, assistant city manager. Sorry, Dave Kiff. We need something far more substantial than this. If there's one person that's already under investigation, I think we can probably presume that there are some things that we need to look at. This doesn't satisfy those needs. We need to go deeper. We need a forensic audit. We need to more than double this $100,000 to a $250,000 so we can actually get the job done right. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name's Dana Roberts. I'm President, CEO, CW Driver. We were the construction manager and the general contractor for the construction of this new Civic Center. I would just like to offer you our complete cooperation if you decide to go ahead with an audit. We're ready and willing to give you everything that you need for the audit. This is pretty common in our industry with large contracts like this. Most contracts like this have an audit provision, and we start preparing for that audit about the same time we sign the contract. So if there's any reticence about your general contractor being cooperative, you have our full cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to council. Mayor Pro Tem Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. What we have before us tonight is a proposal for a third-party process and performance audit of the Civic Center project. It is before us because of questions, skepticism, and frankly, divisiveness that after many months, indeed years, have not receded. And I believe it is important for everyone to understand that this will be neither a witch hunt nor a whitewash, and it will be a professional third-party review as far removed from politics as possible. And I commend Mr. Roberts. Thank you for your good comments and generous offer of cooperation, and your mention that this is a standard operating procedure in large construction projects. I want to get to the facts about how the course of this project from inception to design to construction fits with best practices in the industry. I want to know what guidance and choices led us to spending upwards of $600 per square foot and approving some 800 change orders for what is essentially an office building. And I want to know, this is not to cast blame or score political points. I want to know this so we will understand what to watch out for in the future, so we never again overspend taxpayer dollars on a building project. Conversely, if the audit reveals that the Civic Center project was completed within the scope of best industry practices and within an appropriate budget for the scope and time and cost estimates, it's important that the community understand and know that information. Either way, it's important for the community to have full disclosure, such as Mr. Roberts indicated that this is a line item in every major construction project to complete a closeout audit. I also want to know the facts so we could finally move on and beyond the political back and forth on this and go forward with a common understanding of what went wrong and what went right. And there are many, many, many things that went right in the Civic Center project. And this is the right thing to do. The benefits of this process and performance audit in enhanced understanding of large project construction management will save taxpayer dollars in the future. I am convinced of that. As someone with more than 30 years' experience in leadership, senior leadership of one of the top corporations in America, I can tell you that a review of this sort is a common and non-controversial procedure in the private sector, just as Mr. Roberts indicated, with every major construction project. A closeout audit review is a line item in any major capital project. It is typically not done 5 years after the fact, however, but it's not too late because we will learn from this. Indeed, I've never heard of anyone in private business objecting to a closeout audit unless there was something perhaps that they didn't want discovered. Figuring out how to do it better the next time is such a basic business principle that it needs no explanation. So in summary, I support this measure, or I guess I'm saying I make a motion to go forward on supporting this measure, this performance audit, because it's important to get some closure on this issue and to take the lessons learned as we move on to other important public projects. Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
So for clarification, you're moving the staff recommendations A, B, C, D through H.
Yes, and could I just make a minor amendment too? There is a blank on when to have this concluded by, and my objective is to, as soon as possible, to be realistic of getting the construction management firm hired and the various steps that are outlined in the staff report. It might not get underway till maybe August, September. I want complete thoroughness in this project, so I'll put a placeholder March 1st, and if more time is needed, we'll come back to council to be as needed. But I do not want this to go on unnecessarily long, but I do not want it to be too short either.
So it could be completed sooner than March 1st.
Yes,
That's
yes.
just an outside date at this time.
Correct.
Okay. And we have a second to that. Councilmember Curry.
Well, you know, we reviewed this issue in January. Staff presented an exhaustive analysis of what they thought went right, what they thought went wrong, what were the lessons learned. And they provided 2 feet worth of documents, all of the change orders that have happened on this project. And the council asked some questions, and the council ran out of questions to ask. So I think what we really do have here is a political issue that's designed to simply keep this issue in the public mind to get into the elections for next year. And you say, well, Keith, how do you know that? I say, well, let's look at some of the facts. The city manager produced 2 feet worth of documents about this project and brought them to the council meeting. And not a single member of the city council read a single word of any of those documents. They happen to be posted on the city website. So the idea that there is rampant curiosity up here about what happened and who did it and how it happened is belied by the fact that nobody actually read any of the work. I tell my students, if you want to know the subject, you've got to read the text. Nobody here read anything about what was going on. Then Mr. McCafferty's had 2 editorials in the paper supporting this, so it's gearing up as part of the campaign issue. This was originally proposed to be done in June of 2016, so it would be ripe for the 2016 election to keep the issue going. I think this can be done in December, and I hope that we get it done much quicker than that. I think the scope of work actually leads to I disagree with Mr. Glynn about this, to a predetermined conclusion about where we're going to go. One of the scopes of work items is we're asking people to read what's on our website and tell us what it says. We ought to be able to do that ourselves, I would think, and save the $100,000. I know I talked to Megan from the Register. She's going to write a story about this. Maybe we should just read the story, and then we'll know what went on, and we can save the taxpayers, the full amount of this budget, because there's been plenty written and plenty said and plenty talked about in terms of the lessons that have been learned. I don't know what the taxpayers are going to get out of this other than to continue to flog a political issue to help somebody's flailing political agenda. So what bothers me is that we've set up sort of an oversight structure here in which the politicians who have run on a campaign on this issue are sort of overseeing the process of the consultants doing it. I think if we're going to do this, let's do a full construction oversight. Let's wall off the politicians from having input into the conclusions and the results and how the work's going, and hold our consultant responsible and get the oversight committee. I mean, one of the things that's going to be investigated is whether or not the ad hoc committee, the building ad hoc committee, was the right way to go, or whether or not that committee exercised too much power away from the city council. Well, now we're going to do that by setting up a committee exactly the same way, who's going to do the same thing. So let's at least learn our own lessons from this and keep all the political people out from being consultants. Let's use real professionals who are consultants. Let's not have political interference through this oversight committee. Let's have, as is typical for these kinds of things, a gag order that keeps the politicians from influencing the selection of the process and keeps the consultants from talking and lobbying the council before it gets here. And let's move forward that way. So I'm inclined to believe that we don't need this, but I will move an amendment that the process be conducted independently of political influence, that the city manager shall conduct an RFP process and select a contractor, that the RFP respondents be forbidden from any contact with the city council, and that the city manager and staff be required to report to the public and to the council any efforts by members of the council to tamper with the selection process and or aid to the recommendation of the selection of any contractor or to influence the results of the analysis. And I'd make that as an amendment.
Okay, so you're making an amending motion that...
Mr. Mayor?
Excuse me. Mayor Pro Tem Dixon's motion with the date that she submitted for item H with your additional language, and that's an amending motion. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Mr. Mayor, I would second it for the purposes of discussion.
Okay.
Mr. Curry, I like the idea of no ad hoc. I would like to also have a separation of staff from it. So would you consider modifying it so that this council and staff would hire the manager that's talked about in the document, and then let the manager be the one that drives the hiring of the consultant that will actually do the work, and therefore it's isolated from both staff and from council?
So is it your view, Mr. Piotr, that there would be a manager separate and apart? Is that what you think this says? A manager separate and apart from the consulting firm?
I would say yes.
You think that's what we have before us?
No. They talk about a manager before us, but we have the ad hoc committee. I'm with you. Let's give the manager independence from the ad hoc committee and let him direct the consultant rather than having staff direct the consultant.
Well, I don't know that I would necessarily, and I appreciate your thoughts on that, that's necessarily the way to go either, because we've had, Mr. Kiff, has anybody suggested to you people who might be brought in as managers or involved in this process?
Yes.
And I see my friend Mr. Dunlap here, Bill Dunlap. Has he been one of those people?
Yes.
Yes. So here we have a situation where the proposed manager, and Bill is a friend of mine, and Bill would agree with this characterization. He's a strong conservative political activist. He and I have been members of the Lincoln Club together. But you've got members of this council who are lobbying for a selection of a political activist to be a manager or involved somehow in the analysis of this project, which to me is not an independent analysis of what we're going to do.
And I have no problem with opening that up to the selection of the council and let the council select that guy.
Well, my point is that just sort of emphasizes how this is sort of a political process that we're wading into in terms of what we're doing. Well,
Counsel-
Mr. Kiff, could you conduct a process that would select an independent project manager, separate and apart from anybody that may have been suggested to you?
Well, actually, let me offer some comments. I know I was very close to this project, and I don't want to have my perspectives taint that, which is in effect why we talked about having the working group look at it and/or the city attorney actually enter into the contract, because I want this to succeed as much as everybody else, and I don't want anyone to criticize me for possibly influencing it either way. I do think there are members of the staff that weren't involved in all that, which are competent, who could manage this effectively, possibly under the direction of the city attorney versus me. But those are just some of my thoughts.
Well, I would support that approach, Mr. Piotr, if that would be responsive
My
to your...
concern is that I'd like to see that manager with good construction experience, even if it's not a Mr. Dunlap, but somebody with that kind of experience I think is going to be instrumental in making sure that the report comes out and that the actual firm doing the auditing gets in and digs into those details. You know, part of the issue is that with CW Driver, as they're here, and we talked about in the report, CW Driver is looking over CW Driver's shoulder, and we really didn't have somebody on staff that was competent to look over CW Driver's shoulder. And that's what I don't want to miss on this. I'd like to make sure the manager's competent to look over the auditor's shoulder. So I'd like to see that kind of experience. And I don't see that kind of experience in staff.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with you, Mr. Piotr. But I do think, though, that maybe to answer more directly Mr. Curry's question, someone, whether it's the city attorney or otherwise, I think could do an effective RFQ process associated with a project manager that could help oversee that. I'm just saying it shouldn't be me doing that selection. It would be a little bit odd for the city attorney to do that, but I don't see another option if you're doing it with staff actually doing that work. But I do think we could make that work.
Well, one of the, just to also note, is that this approach here that we're doing tonight violates Council Policy A6, which we adopted, where this is supposed to come up for discussion and then have discussion and come back in a fully formed way. So perhaps, Mr. Piotr, if you would second my motion and it's adopted, then we can have this, including all this no tampering and no hiring political contributors, that kind of thing, and then have this come back to the council in a way that we could perhaps embrace it then.
No, I like it, as long as we can do it as a separate manager. I'm good with your motion with all of the non-political, and I mean, my goal is to get a true independent audit here. Yeah. So if we can have, rather than, I think your motion was really that staff would be the leader or the manager of it, and I just want that manager. It doesn't have to be Mr. Dunlap, but somebody with some good construction experience that, the city attorney can put an RFP together or RFQ together to get that person. That guy then becomes the lead, independent of all the politics. No ad hoc committee, no staff influence.
And do this within the $100,000. You think we can do that, Mr. Kiff or Mr. Hart?
I do, yes.
Okay, there we go. So there's where we are.
So modify your amendment to do the independent manager.
Modify my amendment to have an independent manager selected through a process organized by the city attorney, incorporating the anti-tampering, anti-contributor hiring, anti-political involvement with the ad hoc committee stuff to be done as quickly as possible within the $100,000.
And I second that. I just want to go on record that Keith and I are agreeing on something.
Well, that's
It's
monumental.
a day for it.
That's a
Very
start.
limited.
Councilmember Muldoon.
Thank you. I will not be supporting that last-minute trick, is what I view it as. I ran on fiscal responsibility for City Hall. Staff was in charge of the project, and staff cannot be trusted with managing this. They must answer to us, the committee, the council people. We answer to the people of the city of Newport Beach, and it's inappropriate to give that over to a staff member who, at the end of the day, answers to Mr. Kiff. I can't be a part of it. I think it's just flawed. It's too quickly thrown out there, and it's risky. I personally don't like the risk. We do need outside eyes, and we need a professional, so I'm looking forward to having a professional do it. We are not politicking this. There were some legitimate concerns when I suggested the summer of 2016 being the date, because it was viewed as something that could be political, and that's not what I want at all. So I said, okay, let's go to March, and my colleagues were amenable to that, because I don't want that to be the case either. I just want it to be as much time as it takes, but I don't necessarily think it's far off base to be afraid of it being politicized. So I definitely want to protect it against that, but I think it needs to stay in hands of the people who are accountable to the citizens of Newport Beach, and I think that means an ad hoc committee as outlined in this proposal. So I'm just going to weigh in favor of Diane Dixon's motion and Mr. Petros' second.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Dixon.
And do we want to recognize Mr. Dunlap?
I apologize, and you're in the middle of your discussions. I'd just like to add the comment that was made by Councilman Curry about the politics in the reference to me as being a political activist. I've supported all of you in your campaigns, okay? So I have no political agenda in this, and the pay for what potentially is going to be some advisor, obviously I'm not doing it for money, and if I don't need to be a candidate, I'm fine. I'm just here to make sure that this would take place in the proper fashion. So I've got no oar in this water. So anyway, just wanted
And for the record, I know Bill to be a very honorable guy. He's active in his church. He's active in the community. But I do believe that it's not appropriate for us to have somebody who's been politically active and a contributor to all of us, or any of us, to be part of this process.
All right, may I still? Okay, well, just a couple of comments. In the staff report, it indicates that we are looking for someone on the construction management firm as well as the audit manager to have at least 20 years experience in construction auditing. Someone who fits Mr. Dunlap's career experience in construction and project management is the kind of candidate I'd be looking for, and I too would be supportive of that. I just want to address Councilman Curry. Thou doth protest too much. If there is nothing, we're not looking for known, you know more than I do in terms of the process that was going on. This is, as we've heard earlier, this is a normal, good business practice. There's nothing to be afraid of. If we're looking to protect, as stewards of the taxpayers, we're looking to protect their investment. This was a huge $140 million. I know we all hear $1 billion thrown around on the national level, federal level. $140 million spent in lovely buildings, but for a city of the size of Newport Beach, requires us to say, was this money well spent? And if yes, that's terrific, let's all have a party and celebrate. Or if not, where can we learn? There's nowhere in my business or your business experience that you proceed on any kind of size of project and don't step back and say, how can we do this better? So this is not an aspersion negative against staff. It's just an independent review to ferret out best practices that we could learn from. There's nothing to be afraid of, nothing to run from. It should have been done. I don't know why it wasn't part of the original scope of work. Mr. Dunlap and others like him with the experience in construction management, and also Mr. Roberts has personally said this is business as usual, standard operating procedure. It is not political. I didn't even think of the political connection until you pointed it out and others pointed it out. I go, oh my gosh, forget it. Let's move it back. Let's get it done quickly. Let's get it done, close the books, and we can be proud as a city that we are transparent. I ran on a platform of transparency. We listened to the residents. This is what the residents at my town hall last night, somebody said, Diane, when are you going to do the audit? What's going on? I hear this everywhere. I want to be done with it. We all want to move forward so we can be proud that our community and our council and our staff operates on the principles of openness, transparency, and fiscal responsibility. So thank you. That's my speech.
Councilmember Petros.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be supporting the amended motion by Mr. Curry and Piotr. I think it is naive to consider that this isn't political. Anything we do up here is a political move. The fact that Mr. Kiff was approached about Mr. Dunlap is a political move. And I think the more that we can distance ourselves from this process is good for the notion of transparency, honesty, and integrity. I know that this council will get the opportunity to review that audit, that review when it comes out, and we will get to say how it's administered and what we do with it. The more that we can stay away from it and allow the process to move forward, I think is good. And I think that what has been cobbled out on this historic evening, where Piotr and Curry have agreed, should in fact move forward. So I would call for the question.
Did you feel the ground shake when you said that?
Could you restate where we are right now?
Mr. Mayor, I have a quick clarification first.
Yes.
Mr. Muldoon was talking about that this manager, or that the staff would end up managing, and it is clear that it's supposed to be an independent manager, but he does have to report to somebody. And I know, Mr. Curry, the interest is that he would not report to any one of us individually and never even have a discussion with us individually. But it does seem appropriate that he would be responsible to us as a body as a whole and would give his reports to us, not to staff. And that would be in closed session or open session, depending on what he's discussing. But just to make that clear, that manager would be responsible to report directly to the council as a whole.
Well, he would. There's contract administration issues, and I think that's why the city attorney, who is a direct report to the city council, would be appropriate for managing that.
That makes sense, especially for contract administration.
Sure.
The city attorney's office would handle that aspect of it, and then he would report directly to the council for the items on the
right
on the audit.
When he does his draft and his final report.
I think that sounds good.
Okay. So did you
vote
have
on the
something
amendment
else to
first?
I really want to clarify where we are on this
Do that in a second on the amendment.
alternative motion here.
Okay, staff, can you clarify the motion for us? Just so we get it all down here.
I just want to make sure I had clarity. Would I be doing the RFQ for just the independent manager who would then select the audit review firm? Or would I do the RFQ for both? That seems a little clear. So I do it for both.
I would say that the manager is going to have input into that RFP, although you would handle the logistics as the city staff. Does that make sense?
So kind of a two-step process where
Yes.
we select the
Yeah,
manager first.
you
and
would
we'll do an
respond to
RFQ.
him, basically.
Okay, so I wanted to make sure that he wasn't
Or her.
independently selecting who would do the audit review, the firm that would do it.
Okay, so
So-
can we have a restatement of the motion, please, so we're all clear on what we're voting on?
This is just on the amendment that we're going to vote on first, right?
Yeah, the amending motion is the motion because it incorporates the main motion.
Well, it wasn't a substitute motion, so technically we vote on the amendment first, and then we vote on the amended motion if it's in fact amended.
Well, if you want to go to that level of detail, we can do that, or we can do it the simple
Well,
way.
I think people want to vote against the amendment, but still might vote for the overall proposal,
Okay.
so.
Okay, then that's probably a good point. The one thing I would say before we have the motion restated is that the ad hoc committee needs to be very careful, and the city attorney in developing the scope of work to make sure that we have a very tight scope of work for the construction manager, auditor manager to work under, so we don't have mission creep, which in my experience can happen in situations like this, so that we keep the time under control, the cost under control, and the actual scope of what we're doing. We've all seen what's happened with the Great Park audit, which started off at a couple $100,000, and now it's over $1 million.
1.4.
Or $1.4 million, well, whatever it is. So just one word of caution on that as we go ahead and develop this
And Mr.
information.
Mayor, just to clarify, there is no ad hoc committee if the amendment's successful. And,
Correct.
And the
I
council
stand
as a
corrected.
whole would be selecting the qualifications of that manager.
Right, and I stand corrected on that. Okay, so can we have a statement of the amendment to the motion? We'll vote on that, then we'll go and vote on the main motion.
So the amendment to the motion would be to strike the role and function of the working group, strike the working group, allow the city attorney to do a set qualifications and issue a request for qualifications for the audit manager, as well as the auditing firm, and that the audit manager would report directly to the council, and the city attorney would manage that contract. That's as I understand the
Well,
amended.
and there was additional language, and I have it written out here, so there is no mistake after the fact.
There's a
That the process be conducted independently of political influence. The city manager, or in this case now, city attorney, will conduct the RFP process and select a contractor and manager that the RFP respondents be forbidden from any contact with the council and the city manager and the staff, and be required to report to the public and the council any efforts by members of the council to tamper with or influence the selection process or aid in the recommended selection of any contractor or influence the results of the analysis.
Okay. Is everyone clear on the amendment? Councilmember Muldoon, you clear on the amendment?
Yeah, as much as you can be, and that was all added. I don't know if you're all going to buy into that, so I just want to lodge my objection to letting anyone in staff oversee a project that staff ran. Unbelievable.
Okay. All right.
Oh, may I
Did you want to comment?
May I comment? Just to clarify, Mr. Muldoon, are you referring to staff as the city attorney staff or the who selects the audit manager?
I think the only ones up here who have a duty to the people are us.
Yes.
And I have a problem with any entity other than us overseeing this, because I know that the person who issues the RFP is going to get the result that they want from the consultant. And maybe I'm being a skeptical individual, but I think it's
well, will we have, in this process that we're defining, will we as a council have an opportunity to review the RFPs?
Yeah, I mean, if the council's not comfortable, I'm a little uncomfortable. If any council member is not comfortable with me running the process, I think I could run a fair process. But if you're not comfortable with me running the process, maybe a better way to do it is for a subcommittee of the council, working group, put together an RFQ and select a manager as a body, bring it back, you select the manager as the body, and select the audit review firm as a body. And then they can report back to you as a body.
Which is what we proposed originally.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a little bit different. You'd have to, if you're going to do interviews and do the selection by a working group, you'd have to do that at a Brown Act meeting, the way it's currently proposed.
Well, I would just say to Mr. Muldoon's point that whoever selects and gets the result they want is the reason why we shouldn't have the city council people who have an opinion about this making the selection.
Mr. Mayor, you have a
Councilman
motion
Petros.
and an amendment, or a second on the floor. Could we please vote?
Okay, well, any other comments?
Oh, I'm just trying to sort this out in my mind.
No, we don't have a lot of time. Let's call for the
So
vote
we're voting
on
on
the
the
amendment.
amendment.
On the amendment. Let's vote on the amendment. So bring up the voting screen. This is a vote on the amendment. Nope.
Your request to speak screen up?
No, I turned it off.
Still not up.
Nope, no one's up.
They've all voted already.
Oh, they all have?
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, I'll just vote yes.
With council members Dixon, Duffield, and Muldoon voting no, the motion carries 4-3.
Okay, now we'll go to the main motion. Please vote on the main motion when the screen comes up. Mine's not up.
No, it's not.
Am I going to get one?
Wild close.
There we go.
It's for the main motion. With Councilmember Petros voting no, the motion carries 6-1.
But no.
Okay, we'll now go to public comments on non-agenda items. Anyone want to speak on an item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing no one, I guess we're adjourned.
Wait.
Peace in the valley, my friends.